Before we begin, I would like to share the structure of this evening's debate. First, both debaters will give an opening statement. Then both will have the opportunity to cross-examine the other with a series of questions. Following the cross-examination period, both Lila and Kyla will engage in an unmoderated, open discussion. We will then transition into closing statements and conclude with a student Q&A. My name is Sadie Burnett, and I have the privilege and honor to introduce the pro-life debater, Lila Rose. Lila Rose is the founder and president of Live Action, a pro-life organization committed to revealing the truth about abortion and advocating for the rights of society's most vulnerable, the unborn. She established Live Action in 2003 at the age of 15, driven by a mission to expose the harsh realities of abortion. Her organization, Live Action, boasts the largest online presence in the pro-life movement, reaching 40 million per month and over 3 billion lifetime video views. Lila Rose was called Messenger-in-Chief of the pro-life movement by Vice News and the face of the millennial anti-abortion movement by The Atlantic. She's the author of Fighting for Life, Becoming a Force for Change in a Wounded World, and hosts the popular podcast, The Lila Rose Show. Lila has devoted her life to ending abortion and making America a more welcoming place for families. Please join me in welcoming Lila Rose.
I'm Lane Trombley, and I will now be introducing the pro-choice speaker, Kyla Turner. Kyla Turner is a streamer and commentator with an advanced background in psychology and behavioral science. She does tours, and she will be hosting debates at AmFest at Major League Sports Grill, December 20th. She immigrated to America from Canada 2 years ago and brings her background in research and uses that empirical training to engage with the messiest topics, whether it's gender, mental health, or political polarization. She's proven herself on international debate stages, but what sets her apart isn't just performance, it's patience. Eurydice brings a calm, level-headed approach to conversations most people fumble through, and she's just as comfortable pushing back on bad arguments as she is building common ground. She's not playing team sports. Her politics are liberal, but rooted in principle and evidence, not party loyalty. If you're looking for someone who can disagree without being disagreeable, and who isn't afraid to say you're wrong and explain why, she's one of the best doing it. Please join me in welcoming Kyla Turner.
Thank you. We will now move into opening statements, beginning with Lila.
Thank you so much for the wonderful moderators that we have tonight and everybody who made it here despite the crazy rain, and thank you so much to Kyla for coming out for this debate. Right now, in a neonatal intensive care unit, there are doctors and nurses working to save babies as young as 21 weeks gestation. Last year, baby Nash Keene was born in Iowa at just 21 weeks old, becoming the world's youngest baby to survive outside the womb. These children are no bigger than the palm of our hands. Their chests rise and fall under tiny wires and monitors. Every breath is treated as precious and worth fighting for. In those NICU wards, no one questions whether the child is a human being worth fighting for. And every single child in NICU in America has their legal right to life protected. Yet, only a few miles from here, within 10 miles away from here, there are children at the very same age and stage of development that can be legally killed in an abortion business. At the Planned Parenthood facility in Orange, elective abortions are done up to 24 weeks old. The baby in NICU and the babies killed nearby, and that will be killed this weekend, are the same age, the same development, the same human beings. The only difference is their location. A society that fights to save the life of the child in one building while ignoring the child that's going to be killed in another faces a profound moral and legal contradiction. This debate is not about slogans or politics. It is about whether our law should permit the intentional killing of that child. The question before us is simple. Should abortion be legal? To answer that question, we first have to define our terms. Abortion, what is it? Abortion is the direct and intentional killing of a living human being in the womb. Surgical abortion is designed to tear the developing human apart. Chemical abortion starves and expels the developing human. Later abortions stop the beating heart of the human with a lethal injection. These procedures do not heal. These procedures end human lives. More than 2,800 children are dying every single day in this country due to legal abortion. Over 1 million children a year. This is the greatest human rights crisis of our time, and it's why I'm here. Here's the core pro-life argument. It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Therefore, abortion is wrong and it should be illegal. Now, often the argument that I just stated, the hang-up that a lot of people have is the second premise that abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. So the question has to come, what is the child in the womb, or what is it in the womb? And the science is clear that human life begins not at birth, but at fertilization. This is not a religious claim. It is the consensus of modern embryology. The medical textbook, The Developing Human, states human development begins at fertilization. This highly specialized totipotent cell marks the beginning of each of us as a unique individual. From the moment of sperm-egg fusion, a new human organism exists with its own DNA, sex, and identity. It is not part of the mother's body. It is a separate and distinct human being. This is admitted by pro-choice philosophers, including Peter Singer of Princeton, who writes, and Peter Singer of Princeton, by the way, supports infanticide for the first 3 months after a baby has been born if the baby has a disability and the parents wish it. He says, quote, "There is no doubt that from the first moments of its existence, an embryo conceived from human sperm and eggs is in fact a human being. At 22 days, the heart beats. At 6 weeks, we detect organized brain activity. At 8 weeks, fingers and toes form. By 9 weeks, the child can respond to touch. Just after 20 weeks, premature babies like baby Nash survive with help. Nothing magical happens at birth. The same human being is simply in a new and beautiful location." Now consider the SLED framework, which identifies the only 4 differences between a life in the womb and a human life outside of the womb: size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. These 4 differences reveal the same value and basic human rights for a human outside of the womb of his or her mother's womb as much as a human inside his or her mother's womb. Let's examine S first, size. Size does not determine human value or fundamental rights. A newborn smaller than a toddler is equally human. A toddler is smaller than a teenager, yet equally human. The child in the womb is smaller still, yet that only reveals the miracle of early human life. If size determined your worth or your right to legal protection from lethal violence, the strong would have rights that the small do not. That is not equality. That is might makes right. Next is L, or level of development. A human's level of development does not determine their value or their fundamental right to life. A 2-year-old does not think, speak, or reason like a 12-year-old, yet both have human rights. If cognitive development were the measure of value, then newborns and those with disabilities and those with dementia would all have diminished worth. The child in the womb has a developing brain, a developing body, and a developing mind because that is how human beings grow. Development describes a journey. It does not establish a hierarchy of whose life matters or who deserves the protection of the law. The next letter in SLED is E for environment. Our environment as humans does not determine our value. Whether you are from Zambia or New Zealand, you have equal human dignity and value and the same basic human rights. Changing location does not change your human identity or rights. A baby inches down the birth canal does not suddenly gain its human rights. This is not science, that would be superstition. If a human being's worth depends on where they are and not what they are, then no one's rights are truly secure. And finally for SLED is D, for a degree of dependency. A human's degree of dependency on other humans, including parents, does not determine their value. Newborns are entirely dependent. I know, I've had 3. So are people with severe disabilities. So are many elderly individuals. It is exactly your dependence as a young human that makes you both worthy of and in need of special care and legal protection. The child in the womb depends on her mother totally, just as the newborn depends on her mother totally. Dependency invites love and responsibility, but it does not erase a person's right to life. SLED makes something unmistakably clear. Every argument used to justify killing a child in the womb could be used to justify killing a child outside the womb. Every attempt to deny the humanity of the child before birth eventually undermines the dignity of human beings after birth. Our Declaration of Independence states that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our human rights, our first right, which is life, is not bestowed by democratic vote. It's not bestowed by governments or by other human beings that are more powerful than us. It is given to us by God, and I believe we are all made in the image of God. This is why the prohibition, do not murder, contains not only legal and moral weight, but eternal weight. Human life is sacred. So let's build a society together that protects fundamental human rights by law and embraces every new life with love. It's time to make abortion both illegal and unthinkable. Thank you.
Abortion is one of the most contentious areas in moral philosophy. Earliest writings on this topic are from Babylonian law, from the Code of Hammurabi, 18th century BCE. In this writing, it distinguishes mother from child, marking both valuable, but if a fetus is killed, it's a monetary fine, while if the mother is killed, the perpetrator receives capital punishment. I strongly encourage all of you to remember the code's ruling there, because it's going to come up again in an unexpected way. The problem with many debates and conversations on abortion is that it is highly emotionally charged. Now, to be clear, the emotions are not the problem. Of course it's emotional. Abortion touches on some of the deepest values that Americans hold: life versus liberty, meaning, death, tragedy, parenting, family, love. I don't want us in this conversation to neglect our emotions. I'm a trained addictions counselor and psychometrist. I love emotions. What I want us to do, though, is understand that wise minds take into account feelings and logic. For the purpose of structure and clarity in this conversation, I want to break it down into its core parts. First is the legal conversation. Policy is, of course, downstream of morality, but it isn't a substitute for it. This is why, for example, we can all agree that cheating is wrong, but not that it should be legally managed. This would violate the penumbra of rights as Americans. Second part of the conversation is the morality. What makes us human? What is the component of life we find meaningful? Is it consciousness? Is it personhood? Capacity for suffering? What even is personhood? What I will argue in this conversation is that regardless of your position morally on abortion, legally, decriminalization leads to the best practical outcomes. My goal personally when it comes to law is to create policy that both reduces abortions and reduces harm and suffering for children, mothers, and women. I will show you comparisons between decriminalized countries versus highly restrictive states, and outcomes that make it clear that the only answer for abortion within our current welfare, education, and health systems is decriminalization. That abortion restrictions actually lead to more infant death, more maternal death, greater levels of childhood poverty, greater levels of foster care involvement, higher levels of childhood abuse and trauma, greater maternal poverty, and shorter lifespans. Morally, I will argue that abortion is often a choice between competing tragedies. Moral philosophy is the science of morality, using wisdom, logic, and argumentation to determine better moral prescriptions. A moral system must be functional, offering structures to evaluate one's actions as right or wrong to be useful. If your moral system, for example, doesn't provide an adequate structure to determine if your own actions have done right or wrong, it's not a very useful moral system. So when does somebody cease being a person? And when do they begin? Let's start with the Christian framework, which Lila and I both share, and I think you guys share. To me, it's obvious, and I would dare any Christian to challenge me on this, that it is when a soul enters and then leaves a body. Except every one of you in here are smart enough to know that this is complicated. When does a soul enter the body? When does it leave? Does it leave when the heart stops beating or the mind stops? What even is a soul? Does it have a material component? The Bible tells us when a body becomes ensouled or when it leaves. The Bible doesn't tell us when a body becomes ensouled or when it leaves. So we are left determining the answer, much like secularists. Moral philosophy often heavily focuses on the Cartesian consciousness that is self-aware and knows itself as an individual. You'll know this as, I think, therefore I am. For this conversation, I want to talk about temporal consciousness, which extends through past, present, and future and can guide us on the fringes of when life begins or when it ends. In medicine, death is marked by the termination of brain function. When we are deciding about pulling the plug on a brain-dead person, we are essentially weighing what the past consciousness would have wanted and the lack of present-future consciousness, which is what we use to say, that person isn't there anymore. What would they have wanted when it comes to deciding to stopping their heart? At the beginning of life, there's no past consciousness that we can refer to. We know eventually there will be a future consciousness, and we don't know when the present consciousness precisely emerges. In many debates, anti-abortion activists insist that it is a scientifically solved issue. It isn't. It's a conceptual and moral issue that we use science to hook our present consciousness or ensoulment dates to. For a moment, I want you to do a thought experiment with me. It's from Alex O'Connor. Close your eyes and picture a triangle. All right, on the count of 3, I want you to tell me the color of that triangle. 1, 2, 3. Great. Each of you could clearly see a triangle to such an extent that you could tell me the color of it. Where's that triangle? If I cut your head open, is there going to be a bunch of neurons that are arranged in orange or yellow triangles? No. It's fundamentally immaterial. It seems to emerge from a highly complex brain structure that can't be localized to an area, a molecule, or a specific gene. As a Christian, this is what I consider ensoulment. This is why my moral line for where personhood begins is between 12 to 15 weeks. This is after the brain has developed 5 divisions that are central to a human being. Before then, they only have 3 sections, which is similar to a gecko. The onset of brain waves are also similar to those of other humans, which I consider a marker of ensoulment. Now, I want to end my opening with a warning. What often happens in abortion discussions is heavy front-loading with emotionally compelling stories and a use of language to maximally shame the opposition or define away the conversation. I fear that this is what will happen in this conversation, but I hope it won't. It seems that Lila's definition could be terminating for the conversation by defining abortion as a synonym for murder, the intentional killing of a human life. Nothing new is being argued here. The negative valuation was just smuggled into the definition. This is intellectually lazy, and it's a definist fallacy. And on a topic so important to our moral values, the burden of thinkers, but particularly for those of us with the mic we speak to, is to at least not be intellectually lazy. Oftentimes, Lila's argument is going to use equivocation by employing the term human life with 2 distinct definitions. She will say science agrees with her because biology defines human life as beginning at conception, genetically distinct organism composed of human cells. The biological definition, though, it has no moral weight because it's also applied to a brain-dead person. She then takes the same term, human life, and wields it with legal and philosophical definitions which affords a person moral consideration, human rights, and implies personhood and consciousness. Here's what I'm going to submit to you. Debaters and speakers who rely heavy on emotional front-loading and evasion of pointed questions are doing so because they believe that you, the audience, are stupid and easily manipulated with colorful language and personal anecdotes. My goal here isn't to get you to just agree with me. I want you to think about abortion, what it means to be human, seriously, honestly, and be open to changing your mind. Here's a final thought experiment for you guys as I run out of time. I want you to look around really quickly and notice all of the brown in the room, and then close your eyes. What was red? Ringo, good one. What was red? If you open your eyes, you're going to look for it, and you'll probably notice a lot more red than there was brown. We often see what we look for, which is why a wise mind tries to look for what we are not seeing. So if you came into this conversation staunchly opposed to me, all I ask is that you genuinely hear me out and consider my arguments on face value. For those opposed to Lila, give her the same respect. Let the best idea win, not the idea we happen to like the most.
Thank you. At this point, we will be transitioning into the cross-examination period, where both Lila and Kyla will have an opportunity to ask one another a series of questions. First, Lila will cross-examine Kyla. Kyla, whenever you're ready. You could take the mics, yes.
Can you hear me? Wonderful. Thank you, Kyla. Okay, so a few questions for you. First of all, you said that you believe that the biological beginning of life for you is different from personhood. And so you think personhood starts between, I think you said 12 to 15 weeks.
Correct.
And that's also, you're also arguing that's when ensoulment begins. Mm-hmm. And you're basing that on the brain development.
Correct.
Can you explain why then somebody who has severe brain damage is properly ensouled if they have severe brain damage or they have a severe brain development disorder?
I don't think that...
Let's say they only have a brain stem.
Sure. If they don't have a brain stem, they wouldn't be
only
alive.
have a brain stem.
Okay, gotcha. In most of these cases, for example, I think we have Jackson, Bluebell, and I think there's a reason why Noah, you'd probably know his name, Noah something. Both of them were born with very little of their brain. The issue is that, first of all, they had a significant amount of their cerebellum. The cerebellum was the main thing impacted. The idea that because they have less of a brain, consciousness doesn't exist, I don't think is sufficient, right? In the case of Noah, we saw that despite the fact that he only had 2% of his cerebellum, by the time I think he was age 5, 78% had regrown, which suggests that neuroplasticity has a capacity to emerge consciousness when the predilections are there.
Sure. So I guess I'm asking more specifically. You said the brain has a certain level of development between 12 and 15 weeks that you says your standard is ensoulment. So, but I'm saying if brain development is disturbed at that time and it doesn't do the level of, well, I guess the first question for you, what is happening at 12 to 15 weeks specifically that would give the child ensoulment?
We have the proper division of the 5 parts of the brain, right? We've got the telencephalon, mesencephalon,
But in the case of Jax or Noah, it sounds like they don't have that division happen.
They actually
entirely.
So
they're missing several parts of the brain entirely that don't develop.
So that's a bit of a misunderstanding about what happened in Jax's brain, right?
Okay.
So while, yes, the cerebellum vastly underperformed, there was less cerebral cortex going on, there actually was still 5 divisions, and we can see that by some of the later development. For example, he moved into things that require the sensory motor system, which is like sucking.
But only his brainstem, unfortunately, the rest of the brain was not developed. It was only the brainstem.
That's not true in the case of Jackson, otherwise he couldn't have had sensory motor reactions.
According to the doctors that evaluated him, they said only his brainstem had existed.
Yeah, so there's a bit of
and people were surprised that he actually survived, Kyla.
They were, right?
And surprised that he even had sensory motor skills, which would speak to the soul being able to emanate from him even without the entire brain existing. And there are a lot of cases, I don't know if you're familiar, there's a lot of cases where people have severe brain issues or developmental disorders or injuries, and they still, because of their soul, are able to do things that otherwise are not scientifically explainable. Are you familiar with any of those cases?
I am. So one of the issues is that I think you're maybe misunderstanding the neuropsychology. So when we say, for example, that somebody just has a brainstem at birth, that doesn't mean that there isn't like potential for like neural proliferation, because after birth, we still see a fair amount of neural proliferation, particularly when you ease, in this case, the hydrocephaly, which is, I believe, both of these cases of Noah and Jackson, right? So the idea that the cerebral cortex just didn't exist isn't really true. It was greatly reduced. Even in the case of Jackson, yes, he was born with dominantly the brainstem, but there was also the buddings of a cerebral cortex, which is the things that I see. So I guess
then the question would, what exactly is your standard then, just to make sure I can pinpoint this correctly, in terms of development? You said between 12 and 15 weeks. Can you state exactly what you would say is a standard for ensoulment with brain development?
I think that
it's beyond brainstem, it sounds like.
Sorry?
It's beyond the brainstem, you're saying.
Yeah, that's why I said the 5 divisions of the brain.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the 5 divisions of the brain?
But just to be clear, if they're missing some of the divisions of their brain, are they ensouled?
Yes.
Okay, but you just said ensoulment was tied to the 5 divisions of the brain.
Because the issue is that the 2 examples that we're giving don't miss the 5 divisions of the brain. So I guess, the answer should have been maybe not. I'm not entirely sure.
So if someone is missing a division of their brain, are they ensouled?
No, probably not.
If someone has an injury where one of the divisions of their brain is destroyed, are they ensouled?
It really depends on which division of the brain. Huh?
Do they lose their soul?
Which division are we talking about? The telencephalon, the mesencephalon? Like the thing is,
you pick any division.
Well, in the case of mesencephalon, no, definitely not, right? That would be.
So is there? So
it feels like what's happening in this conversation is I don't think you know what the 5 divisions of the brain are.
I'm
which
trying
is
to.
fine. I can explain them to you. The issue is
I'm
that
trying
if
to
you want
identify your standard for ultimately making abortion legal, which is what this conversation is about.
I'm trying to grant it to you, but if I'm using esoteric language that maybe is like losing you in my argumentation, you can just.
It's not losing me. Your standard is that you need all 5 divisions of your brain to be considered ensouled and legally protected.
I think the 5 divisions of the brain and the brain activity as well are 2 proxies that we can use to best estimate when ensoulment occurs, because I think consciousness.
And I'm saying if someone has a division of their brain damaged or there's a failure for it to develop properly, are they ensouled?
It depends on which division of the brain is damaged.
Got it.
Here's another question. Hold on. Before you move on,
you can
I'm not
ask me
going to let
that
you move
question
on.
in your cross-sex because I have 4 minutes left.
Well, I'm not
okay?
asking you a question. I'm clarifying. Okay. In the case of a
Go for it.
mesencephalon, that would be the sheath around your brain that would be gone, right? I don't think that somebody would be not ensouled there, right? But for example, if somebody doesn't have a brain stem, they can't even be alive. And these are some of the things. I think when we look at the divisions of the brain and the brain activity, it's the best proxy that we can use right now for understanding a concept as convoluted as ensoulment. Because I think consciousness is the thing that we are weighing here, and the brain activities is important to that.
Sure. Okay. I guess another question for you then. So would you say that, let's say there is a child at 11 weeks old.
Okay.
Would you say it would be licit to abort them for any reason?
So this is tough. My legal position is it should be all decriminalized. It should be always between a woman
Up until the
and a
moment of
doctor.
birth.
Sorry?
Up until the moment of birth.
That's what decriminalization means, yeah.
Okay. So I do know what that means, but appreciate that. So up until the moment of birth, you believe that abortion should be legal. This includes ensouled babies with all 5 divisions of their brain.
Clarify that
So
question.
you would say it should be legal to kill ensouled babies with all 5 divisions of their brain.
It should be legal, but that doesn't mean it's moral.
Okay, but you think it should be a legal right.
It should be a legal right.
So
yeah.
does somebody who is ensouled, just to be clear, someone who is ensouled with all 5 divisions of your brain, your standard for personhood, they are actually not legal persons that have a right to life. They don't have any legal rights.
Complicated here because I think, for example, when you look at Canada, right? Canada has a fully decriminalized system. We basically see almost no abortions past my ensoulment marker. Almost all of them exclusively are going to be like medical exceptionalism, which I know you take issue with medical exceptionalism, which we can get to, right? But in the case of decriminalization, we see almost
I'm just
exclusively
asking for your legal
abortions
standard.
underneath. Yeah, my legal standard is it should be decriminalized. But the reason for this is because decriminalization reduces abortion and improves the well-being of children, women, and mothers.
Just to be clear, though, because all of the arguments for decriminalization, as you named them, and we'll talk about more, I'm sure, in our discussion, open discussion, have to do with the quality of life for the mother or the child, which is very important, by the way. And for a newborn child...
No, that's not all of it reduces.
For many of them,
It's a reduction of abortion and the improvement in well-being.
Okay.
Those are both of my positions.
I'll grant you that. So what would be the difference between a newborn person who's ensouled with all 5 divisions of your brain, your standard,
and brainwaves,
and brainwaves, and a child weeks before birth that also has brainwaves, all 5 divisions of their brain in a person? Why does one have a legal right to life and one doesn't?
At that case, essentially, what we see in Canada, I'll give you actual practical
I'm very
examples.
familiar with Canada, and there are later term abortions that happen in Canada under the legal system.
Yeah, and so some of them
and
actually,
they can be elective too.
Some of them also get investigated. So what happens in decriminalized states is you can do carve-outs. So in the same way that like states that like restrict abortions might have carve-outs for things like rape or medical exceptionalism. In a decriminalized state, you can have similar policy carve-outs, right? So for example, if there is decent suspicion from the doctor that a woman is intentionally getting pregnant with the sheer goal of killing the baby right before it's born, I would want that woman investigated. She sounds like a crazy person. The issue is that that's not dominantly happening. And in Canada, in one case where that was happening,
what you said earlier.
she was investigated and put in jail.
Just to be clear, Kyla, it just sounds like you said something different. You're saying if somebody has an intention to have an later abortion, that seems by some standard of this doctor, this theoretical doctor, to be insufficient in your view, then that should be an illegal abortion.
There can be carve-outs for essentially where mens rea is perceived from a woman, where the only goal of the abortion is the harm of the
So some abortions should be illegal under your system?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, that's different than what you said a couple minutes ago.
No, decriminalization can include legal carve-outs. Just
So
the way that restrictive can
So
include
just to be clear,
carve-outs.
decriminalization of abortion, in your view, can include some criminalization of some abortions?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. So what would be the abortions that should be illegal in your view?
The moment that mens rea can be established and investigated, it should be done
So should every later term abortion be investigated to determine mens rea?
No, because I don't think most of those laters would satisfy mens rea. For example, if the
But
doctor
how would we
strongly...
know if they weren't
Hold on,
investigated?
if I can just finish. If you want to ask me, you got to let me finish. So if a doctor can establish a suspicion of mens rea, in the same way that a doctor might establish mens rea of like childhood abuse with injuries coming in, I think doctors are trained to do this, and I think that fundamentally the bar would be quite high, but I would actually prefer an instance where like 1,000 people who have malicious intent go basically skate by, then one innocent woman gets put in
But
jail.
if the the doctor was an abortionist who is incentivized to make money off of abortions, he's always going to say the mens rea is something that's favorable according to your legal code. How could you prevent that from happening?
So in Canada, we have a universal health care, so there isn't a financial incentive.
How could you prevent that from happening in the U.S., since we're talking about the United States?
Then you would have mens rea to establish for doctors.
But for an
Thank you for that.
abortionist.
The time for this first segment is up. Now Kyla will have the opportunity to cross-examine Lila. You may begin.
You're feisty.
I love it, Kyla.
You're
you too.
great.
You too, girl.
Just so it's clear, this is a fantastic debate.
Thank you
I
for
was very
coming.
excited to talk
I very
to
much appreciate you
Lila
being here, and
Rose.
I'm very happy to have this
Okay,
conversation.
you're gonna have to
with you.
forgive me. I have to flip through like 9,000 pages.
And I can report to you the 5 parts of the brain: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, the brainstem, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary gland.
No.
No.
It's the mesencephalon, telencephalon,
Okay.
diencephalon. Yeah.
Well, maybe there's different standards then for how we're defining 5 parts of the brain.
My background's neuropsychology, which is
Okay,
why I'm saying, like, if
beautiful.
there's terms you don't know, that's fine. Like, I don't expect, like, I don't know anything about cars. So when somebody says a
there-
piston,
you
I'm
can,
like, I don't know
you
what
can
we're talking
identify 5 key parts of the brain that way. So
about. Hey, you
it
can't
sounds
start
like
my
we're
time.
identifying
I'm
them
not
differently.
cross-examining her yet. She's cross-examining me still.
Okay. Let me. Oh well, I'll let you just ask.
Yeah,
me questions.
sorry, let me
You go.
focus,
Take your
and
time.
Got him. Okay. Okay. Did you want to finish your thought super quick?
No,
Should
you
we do
go.
that in
It's your
open?
time. Your
Yeah,
time.
Okay. Okay.
We've got
Sorry,
30
guys.
minutes discussion.
You guys reset my
We've got
time
30 minutes
too.
discussion.
You guys are great. Okay. So, again, this is not esoteria gotcha, because I really want to be clear. I'm not trying to dunk on you because you don't know words. That's stupid. If I say a word that you don't understand, just ask me, because I have a
appreciate
neuropsych
that. Thank you,
background.
Kyla.
So, do you know what I mean when I ask what your epistemic justification is for your beliefs? I'm assuming you do.
Define that for me.
Okay, so
Yeah.
epistemic justification would essentially be like, why do you believe such a thing? What's
Sure.
the actual through line reason? Typically
Yeah.
down to your foundational axiom.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I
so-
did present that. I don't know if that was, what you didn't respond to everything that I stated. Obviously, you did respond to some of it, but do you want me to present it again, how I see that? I basically, in my view, just to use your language of personhood specifically, if you are a biological living human, you are a person. And ensoulment, we don't know when the child in the womb is ensouled. We actually, as a Catholic, on a religious perspective, because we get into religion here, we don't know exactly when ensoulment happens. The church does not take a stance on that.
True.
But ensoulment doesn't equal, and because we don't know exactly when ensoulment happens, by the way, is yet another reason to be very respectful of human life, because we just don't know. But the church has always taught it, if you want to talk from a religious standpoint, to protect life from the moment of fertilization. And practically speaking, we should protect life from the moment of fertilization because we know we have a biological living human at that point.
So you think that our morality should come from biology?
I think that gives us clear evidence of where human life begins, and then from there you can build the position of we should be protecting all human lives because they are all persons. There's basically no human life. There's no individual human life that's not a person in my stance.
So the issue that I have is you have to pick one or the other. It's either biology or morality.
That's not true. That's not how that works.
This is how axioms work.
Biology presents facts that we can build a case for personhood upon.
So biology
don't-
doesn't give us moral
biology-
justifications,
you're,
right?
You're exactly right, but I think you misunderstand my position. Biology doesn't give us morality. Biology gives us reality, and then we can build morality on that.
So then-
biology tells us, biology does tell us when human life begins.
Why do you believe that human life begins at conception specifically?
Why do I believe it? It's not a belief. That is a scientific fact.
It is
Now-
a belief, because
now-
you're switching the words, right? Because what you're doing is you're saying it's biology, but then you're actually ladening it with moral claims. So which is it? Is it biology or morality?
So let me just be very clear. It is a scientific fact that human life begins at fertilization. It is my belief, my position, my worldview, my argument that if you are a human life, a human being, you are a person, you deserve legal protections, and you should have the right to life protected like any other human life.
So when it comes to epistemic beliefs, you have to pick one. So if your morality comes from
I think you're
biology,
incorrect, Kyla.
well, you could say
I
my
don't-
morality. Well, my
think you're
morality
incorrect.
comes from God. That would be my foundational axiom. And I use science to inform certain things, but my morality, my justification comes from God. Where does yours come from?
My morality comes from a natural order that is ultimately created and designed by God.
So God.
And as I said in my last, in the last moments of my speech, I believe that our human rights, our right to life. Why does a human have a right to life? Where does that come from? It's not my opinion, it's not yours, it's not the government gave it to me.
Sure.
We are given them by our creator, a God who we are made in his image and who endowed us with these fundamental rights.
Gotcha.
And they're given to all human lives, not just women, not just men, not just older people, not just younger people.
And I agree with you, but the issue that I would say is that biology means nothing to you then. It's an optically satisfying red herring because fundamentally
Totally
your
untrue.
epistemic justification isn't,
No.
biology does not inform your morality. Your faith does.
Biology is a acknowledgement of reality, and then your morality is a worldview that addresses that scientific reality. So the scientific reality of when life begins, you're right, isn't a moral debate in and of itself. It doesn't answer a moral question. The moral question then is, should all human lives have human rights? Are all human lives sacred? Are all human lives, do they have value? My position is yes to all of the above. We all have human rights. We're all sacred. We all have value by
Right.
virtue of being human.
So,
And the reason, and the way we ascertain if there's a biological human is science. That is where science comes in.
you hinge your morality on science to inform it, but science is not informing your morality. Morality is informed by God, which is fine. Mine is too.
I think we're saying the same thing in different
not.
ways. I think. Well, you can decide that, but that's fine. I
We
mean,
agree.
The bottom line is
our epistemic justifications are the same. I don't pretend that science is my morality. I say it's
I'm not
God.
saying science is my reality either, Kyla.
You are, because you're saying
No,
it's
I'm not.
biology. So
No.
it's God.
I-
So does
my position, because you could come in here and acknowledge the science alongside me, right? Just like Peter Singer, who's pro-abortion, and say it is scientifically the reality of a new, unique human being at the moment of fertilization. And then you can morally argue a different case because you have a different position, and you could say, well, it doesn't matter. And this is what Peter Singer says. He's very
Sure.
honest. He says it doesn't matter that it's a human being.
Sure.
The mother has the right to end the life, and that is not the same value of a life outside of the womb.
the issue that you have is your
So-
position is just as scientifically backed as my position, right? Because
I disagree.
Because fundamentally our moral systems
I think your
are based
position
on
is
God.
far more arbitrary. Your science is far more arbitrary and murky than mine.
5 divisions of the brain and brain waves are not arbitrary in any
There
way,
is not
shape, or
even
form.
a specific time when you can identify when that special ensoulment
Okay.
process happens. You have a period of 3 weeks.
We can
so
move
what
on.
point in the 3 weeks is it okay to kill and not kill?
Okay, we can move on. I understand the epistemic stuff, not your cup of tea, that's fine. So when you say that God is your foundation of your belief, which it is mine as well, is that because of something your God says? Should everyone else be forced to live in accordance with that?
It's a good question, Kyla, and I think that yes, in a country that is going to be founded and going to have a just order, yes, I think we have to acknowledge that human beings are made in the image of God.
So
and we
how are
have
you
to
different
acknowledge
from
that-
a Muslim activist
and we
trying
ha-
to spread Sharia law?
Well, there's a lot of other Can you say that again?
How are you different from a Muslim activist trying to spread Sharia law?
I'm very different from that because
You want to use your religious predilections to inform what secular and non-Christian
because I
people
think
do.
we can reason together and say that regardless of your beliefs about divine revelation, like Muhammad receiving divine revelation from somebody, it's an act of faith. And there's a lot of Sharia law that's built on divine revelation. I think on a natural level, we can acknowledge that it's wrong to kill human beings. I think we could reason together, even without any religious texts, we could reason together and say, yeah, it's wrong to kill human beings. And even before there was divine revelation, there have been cultures and societies that have prohibited murder. So you don't need divine revelation to prohibit murder, but I do think divine revelation helps cement the reality that human life is sacred. I mean, Jesus Christ didn't come into the world at 13 to 14 weeks when his brain was a certain level of development. He came into the world as a single-cell embryo. And that, I think, is a very important point right there about humanity.
Just to understand, you believe that essentially you do want to impose your religious predilections on secular people who don't agree with your faith whatsoever,
Well,
in the same way Muslim activists would want to do the
No,
same.
Kyla.
to
So
people.
our country, this country that we live in, was founded on certain foundational human rights that were articulated as being given to us by a creator. Do you agree with this?
Yes, but if you
Okay.
go into the 14th Amendment, we're going to have some
by
issues.
so by that argument, the very fact that we live in this country, you could say, well, it's just like being under Sharia law because we live in America and we have endowed by our creator.
I don't think we live
I
under
would
Sharia
argue
law.
they're totally different because Sharia law, well, it may include some elements that mirror some elements of natural law, and Christianity also includes levels of their own divine revelation that I
Sure.
think are
So-
highly anti to the human
just
person
to
and
take
heretical.
my time back, just because I have limited time.
Yeah.
Essentially, you're saying, well, yes, but Christianity is better than Islam, so that's why I can impose my religious predilections on others, but Muslims can't impose theirs on others.
Do you believe that we have any human rights given to us by our Creator and not by the state?
Well, both. Our state also confers us human rights, separate of our Creator, and our Creator also confers us rights.
But are the state's rights completely arbitrary, or should they mirror what the
No, they're
Creator's rights
societally
are?
arranged and organized together, right?
But what's that based on?
Population vote, typically, in a democracy.
So your rule of law would be pure democracy, not based on any foundational principles, just whatever the will of the people is.
But there's
no
a
matter
lot of
what it is.
foundation. Well, this is like saying secular people can't have moral foundational. They can, right?
But you
Like,
need to align on certain key moral foundations to have a
we
society.
often do. This is why we work really well in a secular democracy, despite the fact that many people are religious and not. We mostly work well together. Although, to be fair, in 2025, it's looking like we're getting along worse and worse. But by and large, we can agree with a lot of moral principles. Can I kind of shift to asking
for it,
you
yeah. We'll pick
one
that
more
up
question?
later, yeah.
Okay. If you have a burning building and you can save the occupants in one room, I know you love this one.
I love this one.
One room has a baby born 2 weeks ago, and the other has a morula. And for those not familiar, that's just a fertilized egg, basically as late as it gets before it becomes like a blastocyst. So it's had about 4 cell divisions. Which one are you saving?
I would absolutely try to save both.
You can't.
I know I can't. It's like asking me. It's really like asking me if you have your son in one room and your other son in the other.
Sure.
Who do you save? And
Okay.
It sucks, right? Because they're both equal in dignity, and I don't know what I don't know what I would do in that emergency situation. But what I would do in that emergency situation doesn't mean that one son is less valuable than the other, or the embryo is less valuable than the baby, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, this is the issue.
This
the
is why
reason-
this is kind of
It's not silly.
in some ways a useless hypothetical.
It's
Although
not a
I
useless
appreciate it. It's
So
fun.
your answer probably wouldn't be, I stand there stunned and don't pick, right? You would probably do
of
something.
course, you
What would you
run.
do? Would you save the baby or the morula? Because I know,
Yeah.
no matter what I think, I'm saving the baby.
Thank you. The
Thank you.
cross-examination period is over.
I try to go for both, really. And whatever one's closest to me. I mean,
You can't answer hypotheticals
Thank
like that.
you.
Sorry.
I
Next-
know, it's a toughie.
Next, we will be transitioning.
But you shouldn't kill either one, is the bottom line.
Next, we will be transitioning. Lila and Kyla, you will both now have the opportunity to have an uninterrupted, open discussion where you may continue your conversation. You may begin.
Gotcha. So when baby and morula are in separate rooms, you stand there stun locked and save nobody. That's your answer.
No. I would start running around and trying to save whoever I can.
You can't save both. That's not how hypotheticals work, right? And just before you all
Kyla,
laugh and
for
be
the-
like,
for the
this is
sake
so
of-
silly,
Yeah.
let me explain to
yeah.
everyone why philosophical hypotheticals are really, really important,
Well,
right?
okay, Kyla, let me add.
Sisyphe's
Hold on,
dilemma
hold on.
is a good example of
Kyla,
this.
I agree that hypotheticals are important. So let me ask you this, because I want you, because this is what you're asking me effectively, right? Let's say you have 2 hypothetical children. You and your husband have 2 hypothetical children. One is a little older than the other, of course. They're not twins. You have to pick one. Who do you pick? Who do you pick?
My answer would probably be if one's a morula and one's a
they're
baby
both
child.
born, Kyla. Who would you pick?
I have 2 born children. I would probably end up, unfortunately, picking the one I happen to like the most, which is tragic. It's awful. Well, before you laugh, hold on. Before you laugh.
So
Wait,
no, that's
wait.
fair,
To
it's
the
fair,
crowd.
It's
To
fair.
the crowd.
So wait,
right
so then
now.
the next answer
Right
is
now. Hold
hold
on. You guys got to pause.
So-
We've got 30 minutes.
so then the next-
1 second.
Yeah.
The crowd's answer right now is to be stun locked and let both die, and that's
No,
not
I
real.
wouldn't let both die.
That's
I
not
would run
real.
to pick whoever was physically closest to me. That's who I
Sure,
would run
that
to.
might be an answer
yeah,
too.
Yeah. So, but the bottom line is those scenarios, as much as I appreciate them, as fun as they are, we've done a lot of content around them. They don't tell you which one should have legal rights versus
So
which
they
one
do.
shouldn't.
They do, because every person-
Because in that scenario with your 2 kids. Because you might like one or be closer to one versus the other in the moment of the decision,
that's a
should one
utilitarian argument. You go,
should
when
one
I have
have
to
legal
choose,
rights versus the other?
Yeah, that's a utilitarian argument. When I have to choose between 2 horrific tragedies, I do what's most efficient and increases the probability of that child's life surviving. That's what I do. That's a good answer, and it has
But does that mean one of your kids should not have the legal right to life and should be killed via
So
some
if the
sort of
morula's
act of
closer
violence?
to you and the baby's further away, you're saving the single-cell organism?
I would try to save both. I would probably
can't
run.
answer. I will
Honestly,
try to
if
save
the
both.
baby's crying, I'd probably run to the baby first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone saves
But it doesn't
the
mean I
baby.
think it's okay to kill the embryo.
I didn't
that's
say
where,
that you did. No, this is
it's okay.
why abortion conversations are hard. It is a choice between tragedies. It's not like everyone's like, God, it's so fun killing morulas. Nobody's saying that. The issue that I'm trying to pose is, what if it's 2 morulas that are closer to you?
Yeah.
What if it's 15? How many morulas need to exist in the one room before you opt to save them over the baby?
Yeah.
That's the important
I mean, you could
question.
also say, to go down this line of hypothetical, you could say as an example, okay, you can kill 1,000, you can save 1,000 children over in India, right? If you shoot this 1-year-old. What do you choose to do?
You always shoot the 1-year-old and save 1,000 people. Always.
I would
every
never
single,
know.
every
Absolutely
single
not.
time.
No,
because
you do not commit an evil act in order that a good act may
So
come
you
of
just
it.
abstain and then everyone dies?
No, well, in this scenario, you would be the one actively shooting the
Wait,
1-year-old.
so if I choose to do nothing, nobody dies?
No, if you choose to not
Because if
shoot
nobody
the
dies if I do
1-year-old
nothing, yeah, I'm
in
gonna
this scenario.
not shoot someone.
Anyways, the point of this is,
yes, that's
I
what I
think we
thought.
could go on. I'm actually really curious about your worldview because you were asking about mine earlier, and
Well,
we
you
were
haven't
discussing.
finished answering my questions about the morula.
Well, and we were
You're running from
Well,
it.
I think we could just keep going in circles on it, which I'm happy to, but I think we're going to keep going in circles.
We don't, right? Here's
So-
the thing. Every hypothetical you pose me, I will just answer it. Because I think about these things, and these hypotheticals, to those who are not here, the purpose of philosophical hypotheticals is to test your moral principles. That's what it's for.
Thank you, Kyla.
So if there are two morulas, if there are 2 morulas,
Let's
I'm
go for a
actually
few more
seriously
minutes
asking,
then. That's fine.
how many morulas need to be in the closer room before you pick them over the baby? Is it infinity? Because for me, it's infinity. I'm always picking the baby. But if you now have a 15-week developed child, God, I don't know. I might go. I'm probably going to pick the 15-week.
I mean, you could do the same scenario with a toddler in one room and a newborn in the other, right? Or you could do 10 newborns in one room and 5. We could do endless scenarios. I think at the end of the day, especially in an emergency situation, who someone picks in an emergency situation doesn't change the legal rights of who wasn't picked.
Sure,
So
but
I
the
think that's
issue is
where-
that that's not a
That's
good
where
point.
these scenarios, I think, are not very useful to the question of should abortion be legal
In an
or
emergency
not.
situation, we don't garner moral constitutions at all to anybody because it's an emergency situation.
Here's a
in
question,
a
like the
hypothetical,
Titanic, right?
it does
men and women,
test how we think.
men and children first, right? The Titanic, men and children first, or children and women first.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Okay?
definitely
Yeah.
not the men.
Not
I think
men.
it's usually children and women.
Not even Jack. So in that case, the women and the children were supposed to be first, right? Does that mean that men should have less legal rights than women and children?
This isn't about legal rights, this is about morality. And we
Okay,
can't
well,
do
I've been talking about legal rights, and I am
if we
talking
want to talk
morality
about
too.
legal rights, we can, but the
So wait,
issue
do
is
men
that we're
not have?
swapping.
Hold on. Just do men not have the same moral value as children and women?
No, in that situation, what we say is that there is something noble tied to masculinity that is tied to sacrificial love.
Right. That's beautiful. I love that.
Sure.
So, but
That's
the point
not-
is
that's not a
but-
legal determination.
But the point is that it goes back to my point though, because who you would save in an emergency situation has a lot of times to do with your relationships to that person.
Of course. If it's-
maybe your own, immediate snap decisions based on traumas or experiences you've had in the past, but that doesn't determine the moral value and certainly not the legal rights of the people involved in these endless scenarios. Can you agree with that?
So again, when we're using
But can you
these-
agree with that, Kyla?
moral rights are very different than legal rights that we're
Can you?
talking
Let's
about.
just do moral rights then. You're hung up on legal. Can we just do moral
Well, the
rights?
hypotheticals for morality. And so
Okay, but then so if men have the same moral value as women and children, but you would pick the woman or the Titanic, says women and children first.
that's why my follow-up question is really important. Because if I have to choose between 5,000 men dying or one woman, I'm picking the men. This
Okay.
is why I'm asking you with the morula. I understand why you're stun locked between the morula and the baby when they're equal. And you said distance would be the varying factor for me. That's a good that's a really good answer. That's better than my answer, right? Now the next question is, how many morulas need to be in the closer room before you opt to select it over the child? And this question matters.
Yeah, I
because
mean,
the
if
reality is
we
when
could-
we
we
look at
could-
single-cell organisms, we all understand that we value it less in tragic situations.
Let me give you an
where we
answer you
have
might
to
like.
pick.
Let me give you an answer you might like, and then can we go to worldview because I'm very curious about yours.
Sure.
Here's an answer you might like. If it's in the case of children that are frozen, right? They're basically frozen in time effectively via IVF.
No.
Why?
Not. They're
Why?
not. In this hypothetical, they're not.
Well, then they would be dead already.
This hypothetical is a magical world where the morulas are living, and if you save them, they will become children. That's how hypotheticals work, guys. Sorry.
All right, then if that's the case, then you could make a very strong argument to absolutely save the 1,000 versus the one in the older child in the other room. You could make that case very easily because you're not, because in the case of the IVF clinic burning, or there's a bunch of babies that are frozen, created via IVF, and they're in a freezer, and you could grab the freezer or grab the newborn baby.
So if a baby's frozen, it's not worth as much morally?
Well, no, it's more that you don't if you take someone out of a clinical setting where, by the way, that's why many reasons I oppose IVF, because it's against the human rights of the baby to be frozen like that. But they're in a hostile environment. They're not going to survive without intervention, right? Because they're taken out of the place. They're taken out of the place they should be, which is their mother's womb, right? And that's where they should be naturally developing. Now they're frozen in time. So you can make the case that for sure, and a lot of the time when you unfreeze the babies, they die, et cetera, et cetera. It's very horrible. So you can make the case, well, I know for sure I can save this baby, but who knows, these other babies might be already unfrozen by this point because of the IVF clinic is in damage, or there's a fire going on, or whatever it is. So,
yeah, what you're talking about is what I would label assumed potential, right? So one of the reasons that you're picking the baby is because there is an assumed potential here where we basically treat the potential so real that we act like it is real, right? This is why most people would agree that when third trimester
it's not about
happen,
potential as much as it is
treat it differently than when first trimester. Like when my miscarriage happened, it's different than when my friend lost her baby at 30, I think it was 28 weeks. Everyone looks at that and they understand that both are tragic. Yeah. And this is why abortion topics are so hard. Both options are tragic. I am not dismissing that at all. But that's not how we inform legality or morality.
Let's talk more about your view of how morality and legality should be informed.
Sure.
So you said earlier during the cross-examination that I started with was really interesting. You said you support decriminalization totally, but then there's some criminalization that you support in the later term. I'm assuming it's after ensoulment happens, right? And your view of ensoulment, by the way.
12 to 15 weeks.
Sorry, guys, my mic is coming off here. I know that's going to not be good for later. Let me try to get
You waited for me to find my papers,
back on
so
here.
Take your time.
Okay, so I really want to understand this because you were telling me, basically, Lila, your view is like Sharia law, because you think human beings are made in God's image and have the right to life.
Not like Sharia law. I think your principles are being like a Sharia law activist.
All right, I'm like a Sharia law activist, okay. Yes. So I'm curious then, where do you think human rights come from? Because I think they come from God, not the state.
Are you talking about, so again, we're doing this equivocation stuff. When you say human rights, are you talking about the moral and legal conference?
I'm talking about the human right to life that I think also should be protected by law.
So if you're talking about human moral value,
I'm talking about human moral value, yes, but whether you have...
That's from God.
Regardless of how much moral value you assign to any given human, I'm talking about what I would consider a universal human right that is given to us by God. And let's just say for a minute...
If you equivocate, I can't answer your questions well. Do you mean legal, or are you talking about my moral epistemics?
I'm talking about a human right that yes, one of the consequences of it being a human right is that if you live in any given society, it is incumbent upon the government to develop law to protect that human right within the reason of what a government can and should do.
Oh, okay. I'll do my best to entertain. Usually, you need to pick one, but it sounds like you want to do legality. We can just do legality.
Sure. Okay. But my question is the same. It's that where do you think that these rights come from? Whether you consider them moral or legal rights.
Legal rights come from fiat, typically, is how we would view. So the reason that a bunch of wonderful
But who's fiat, Kyla?
The states.
Okay, so we totally disagree on that.
So you don't think that enforcement of our rights, if somebody comes and they steal my water bottle, which I know you guys are very covetous of it, okay, leave it alone, who do I call, right? I call the cops, right? Because, and the cops are granted the authority by my state, which I grant authority through my vote to do the law, and they'll come and they'll beat you up and they'll give me my water bottle back.
Do you think it's possible for the state to fail to enforce a right that they should be enforcing?
Of course.
Okay, who decides that? How is that to be decided?
Usually the voting populace over time has a conversation about the voting populace, like we're doing now.
Is the voting populace, when it's a majority vote, a very strong majority vote,
what's the electoral
is it always right? Is it always right?
Nope.
Wow, and who decides when it's not right or right? Who decides whether it's right or wrong?
People like you and I are essential to this process, right? These conversations are what we do to, over time, guide and think and talk about the moral rights.
Who decides whether the majority vote that is deciding which rights to be given or not, protected or not by any given population?
Again, electoral college, but
who decides whether that that majority is right or wrong.
So if, say for example, it gets challenged in court and it gets voted all the way up, it would go to the Supreme Court, right? We would have a judicial system.
You're talking about legal government structures now, but let's just do a historical, semi-hypothetical Nazi Germany, right?
Okay. Well, that's an authoritarian state, so it's a little bit different because now you have an authoritarian regime.
Let's imagine, here's a hypothetical. Here's a hypothetical for you. There's a bunch of Nazis, and they are the majority in a country.
Yeah.
And they run the court system too, Kyla. It's a pretty dark space, right? And so they've decided by majority vote, and the Supreme Court has just voted, yeah, this is not the way, that certain groups are considered subhuman. They're not persons under the law. Maybe they don't even have souls and they're born. You know, who knows the arguments they may use for this. And so they say these people can be, basically killed.
Yeah.
Is that okay with you?
From time to time, the blood of patriots must be shed to overturn tyrants. That's what I would say.
But based on what standard, Kyla? What standard would these patriots have to go overturn those tyrants?
Well, that would be up to the population. So obviously, as a Christian,
what does that even mean? Up to the population?
Well, as
Which
a Christian,
population?
I would the people in the state.
But what are they? What standard are they overturning the Nazis with?
It probably depends on the state. So in America, we would have probably a blend of utilitarianism, which is the most popular secular moral system, and Christianity. Those are the two most popular secular moral systems.
Is your worldview? What do you think is the correct worldview, though? Is it some blend of utilitarian?
I'm a Christian.
So in your view then? Is the correct view for a society to have a blend of Christianity and utilitarianism?
I think that church and state should be fully separated, and I think the electoral college democracy has been the best approximation for what God intends for us.
So do you believe that there are fundamental human rights that should be protected?
At a moral level, yes.
Are there fundamental human rights that should be protected at a legal level?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, and where do you get that standard for those rights from?
So again, the legal standard is unfortunately still going to come from
But where do you get your preferred legal? Let's pretend Kyla's the ruler of the world. You are the queen.
You're asking my epistemic justification. I'm a divine command theorist. And kind of blended, I'm a pluralist, but a divine command theorist and a virtue ethicist, right? So where does it come from? Typically, it's going to be from exegesis, eisegesis, and divine revelation, and I blend that with what I think God's nature is and what he would most want for things. And for example, I want policy that reduces abortion, harm to children, harm to women, and harm to mothers. And right now, the data is unequivocal. I could go through the data from Texas. It's infant mortality up. In the state of abortion.
I'd love to talk about that because I think you're totally misreading it.
Up. Childhood poverty up.
But just to be clear,
11% increase in foster care.
Let's get to that in a minute. But just to be clear, so if you ruled the world, and this is the most just world possible, right? That you have to create. You are tasked with creating the most just world possible. Your standard for legal, but that's what we're arguing about here. That's what we came here to do, because we're deciding whether abortion should be legal or not.
No, because I separate so I understand
we're deciding whether or not it should be okay to kill human lives in the womb versus not.
I understand that good legal law is always a compromise, because when it comes to ethics and problems of reality, you often have conflicting ethics.
Okay, well, I totally disagree with that.
This is the Hobbes and Locke
I totally
argument.
disagree with that. That's not correct, because if you have...
Wait, you disagree with that?
No, I disagree, because I don't think there needs to be a compromise. For example...
There's always a compromise.
No, because when it comes to... That's not true, actually.
That is true of all legal law, good law. So Hobbes and Locke is a good example of liberty versus security.
Kyla, come on. There's no law in the United States that says that it is your right as a woman to kill your newborn child.
You're right.
Okay, so there's no compromise there. There is a complete prohibition. You're saying laws are all compromises, so we should make compromises around abortion. There is a complete legal prohibition on killing born children. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
As a society,
and
we've
you're
agreed
arguing,
birth canal,
you're
we
arguing,
value that.
and you're
14th
arguing.
Amendment actually says all persons born.
And to be clear, you're arguing for a virtual, total protected right for mothers, and I'd say virtual because you have some little carve-outs for maybe some criminalization, which are a little murky.
Yep, with mens rea.
But largely speaking, you have a complete, your legal system, you want to protect the right of mothers to kill their unborn children. Is that correct?
I want to decriminalize it.
Okay,
That's not so this is, you're doing the equivocation thing again. Rights
Not
are
really,
not,
no, it's about
hold
whether
on.
you have the right to an abortion or not. That's what we're
rights
talking
are not the
about.
same thing as liberties. What you're talking about would be essentially
The liberty for an abortion or the right for an abortion. Either way, you can pick the language you prefer to use.
The language
it's legal abortion is what I'm speaking
Well, when
to.
we're talking about legality and morality, the language matters.
We're talking about
It
legality
matters a
right
lot.
now. We're talking about legality right now.
So
not morality.
especially legally, the language especially matters here.
Yes, I
So in
agree.
the case of abortion, I do
can
want
pick-
the liberty for it to be
Yeah.
between the doctor and the woman because one, I
But
trust
Kyla,
doctors to not
when
want
you're
to do
queen of the
harm.
world, Kyla, okay, so you were saying, well, we need to make compromises because that's what the law does. So as queen of the world, Kyla, I need to make compromises to help weigh people's interests.
Yes,
as
for
I
best
said before,
outcomes.
there is no compromise right now in the U.S. legal system, and in most legal systems, actually, where it's ever okay to kill born children. In your Kyla's perfect world, is it ever okay to kill a born child?
No.
Okay. So what is different between a newborn baby, including a very sick one, including one born to very poor parents, including one born that's going to go into the foster care system, right? And that baby having legal protection, why is that okay with you and not a baby weeks before?
Because
The
I
same baby.
trust doctors to make the call for medical exemptions that are necessary, right? So I've already said for a carve out, if we have somebody who we have all reason to believe
But-
they're
but
mens
Kyla,
rea.
just to be clear,
well,
just
don't
to be
interrupt
clear.
me. You
Yeah.
gotta let me answer,
Of
right?
course, go for it, yeah.
Right? If we believe mens rea that a woman is intentionally killing her baby with the fetus and the child in her for exclusively the purpose of just killing it, just electively, we can all agree she's kind of a freak. I don't want that protected, and there should be legal carve outs for that to be investigated, which Canada has.
But Kyla, did you know that there are some doctors, and there would be a lot more if our country shifted this way, right? That believe that it is okay to let sick newborns die via neglect.
I would hope that those doctors are being criminally
But
prosecuted.
what if the doctors in their best, because the doctor, when you're talking about these medically, needed abortions, it's often a baby that has a disability. Let's be real. It's a baby with a disability, a sick baby, okay? There's a lot of babies that are born that have disabilities and are sick, okay? So under your same standard, you could have that same doctor decide, okay, what's so special about the birth canal? This baby is still sick. This baby still has a disability. This baby's gonna be a burden on you, the mother. The mother's like, yeah, it's a big burden. Why would it be wrong to kill that sick or disabled baby after birth?
I think so this is one thing we'd probably agree on. I think aborting babies because they have Down syndrome or a disability is wrong.
We're talking about those medically needed abortions in your view, because you're saying that the doctor knows what he's doing.
I don't think Down syndrome justifies a medical need.
Well, let's just say the
abort.
baby's really sick. Let's just say there's a severe disability. They have trisomy 13. They have some very sick situation, and so they're going to have that after birth too. If they have it after birth, if you would be okay with them killing him before birth, would you be okay with them killing with the same sickness after birth?
I think in this circumstance, good doctors and good parents with good mens rea, so they don't have a guilty mind, for those who don't know what mens rea is, would all want that child to live as long as it possibly can, assuming that extreme egregious suffering isn't occurring, right? I would assume that doctors are like this.
Let's say there is a 1-year-old that is suffering a lot. I mean, here's an example.
You should report it if you think the doctor and the mother are colluding together to kill it because they're like, screw this baby.
So let's go to suffering then. It sounds like that's the standard for you, or part of it. There's a family I know recently, their little boy was diagnosed with brain cancer at age 3. Tons of suffering, excruciating suffering. He was suffering. Quality of life very poor, you could argue. You could argue. Would it be okay, and if they decided it's going to be better for him, better for us, better for everyone, and the doctor's like, yeah, this is a terminal diagnosis here. Like the percentage of success rate of healing from this is it's like a miracle.
Well, this child has consciousness. So my answer very simply is my system accounts for this, right? He has consciousness.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's not true because
does he have consciousness?
No, because you're okay with later term
He doesn't have consciousness?
You're okay with medically
I'm not okay
necessary
with
later term abortions.
I think
because of suffering. So
no, hold on.
You're not okay with that.
No.
Okay.
So this
So
is
you're
where
opposed
no, hold
to
on.
all
Let me clarify because right
post-consciousness
now, hold on.
abortions.
Right now, you strawman my position, and you
No,
need
I want to understand your
Well,
position.
you just said I'm okay with just elective late-term abortions. That is
No, we're not talking about
true.
elective. We're talking about ones that are doctors are saying these are medically necessary. The baby's suffering or the baby's disabled. That's what we're talking about right now.
Right, but the idea of saying you're okay with it is the same thing as me saying, oh, you think the child is a
support
Morila?
the legal
Haha,
right.
you're okay with
that's
killing
fair.
Morilas.
I'm
But
talking
that's
about
not true. That's
okay,
not true.
Kyla. Well, then let's talk
Well,
about
you have to grant me the
I'm
same
talking
level
about
of
the
grace
legal
that I'm
right.
granting presenting your position.
All right,
I'll
take
hold on.
it.
I'll just
I'm talking
pause.
about the
Just
legal
to pause,
right.
just to get the idea out for everyone to hear. The issue that I'm taking right now is that you're saying, so you're okay with it if you make exemptions?
Let
That's
me
like me
remove
saying
that language.
you're,
I understand that language
That's like
is
me
triggering.
saying
Okay,
the Morula
I'll
is
remove the
fine to be
language.
killed because I
Kyla,
picked the baby.
Kyla,
That's
Kyla.
not true.
We'll remove the language. When I say you're okay with it, I'm talking about your queen of the world, Kyla legal system. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about a legal
No, because
right.
okay is a moral
Well,
prescription.
remove the language. It sounds very triggering. We're going to remove the language for you, and we're just talking about legal right. Back to my friend.
It should be
Back to my
legal
friend.
for the medical
This is really
exemption
important,
to occur.
Kyla,
That
we're
doesn't
trying
make it
to-
okay or good
Okay.
or awesome or that I love it.
Okay,
right?
got it. I agree. So back to my scenario, which is a real life example. This young child was suffering immensely. Terminal diagnosis. Should the parents have the legal authority with a doctor, lovingly, they had love in their hearts, to
The child is
give
consciousness.
euthanasia to the child?
The child is consciousness, so no.
Okay, so then based on that standard, it sounds like you would also oppose medically needed abortions after 12 to 15 weeks.
So this is something.
Is that true?
Yeah, so your debates.
Is that true?
Yes, so your debates updated my opinion on this. So
Wait, so just to be clear, I want to make
do
sure
you want me
I'm
to flesh
tracking.
that out? Because it'll give you
Well, I just want
props.
to know if you support making it illegal to kill sick or disabled babies after 12 to 15 weeks.
There should be a carve out for mens rea of intentionally trying to kill a baby exclusively on a
Well,
discriminatory
no, they're
path.
trying to end the baby. I mean,
Is it
they
for
know
discrimination because they're saying that because they're sick or disabled they're lesser than? Then yeah,
No,
that's
but
messed up.
Kyla,
I
come
sorry,
on.
I shouldn't
It's
swear.
the same
That's
loving,
messed up. They shouldn't
let's
do
say
that.
theoretically, it's the same loving
Sorry.
heart. Just Kyla, it's the same loving heart of like, oh, my baby's really sick. He's 5 years old and is about to die from cancer. Let's administer euthanasia. It's the same sentiment in the doctor and the parent's heart. Oh, my baby's really sick. They're 20 weeks old in utero. And this is
And
why
it has a consciousness.
And
I
has
don't know how
consciousness.
many
They're
times I
ensouled
can
at
answer
this
this for
point.
you. I know. I
should
think
that
you,
be legal?
So again, if the baby has consciousness and the reason for killing is exclusively based on discrimination of able-bodied, no, I don't think you
But-
should
but then
discriminate to see like,
what about
you know
discrimination?
Maybe we can kill every disabled person. No, that's
But
not
it's not
okay.
discrimination. They're like in my
It's
scenario.
discrimination if the reason you're
Kyla,
killing it
Kyla,
is because
Kyla,
they're
hold on.
disabled. Yes,
Hold on.
assuming they have consciousness, which I'm assuming they
Just
do.
to be clear.
It would be extremely messed up
This
to
is
say,
a
yeah,
this
that
is
person
a
doesn't deserve to
medically.
live.
They would deem this medically necessary.
So that's why, if you let me finish granting you, this is what your debates and a debate with, I think Panache Vishnu, she's an OBGYN, had. It updated me on going, oh, there's very few good reasons for medical exemption. Very, very few. I can imagine a world where maybe there's like one or two, but it sounds like it's actually incredibly rare, which is why I
Okay.
think basically all late-term and mid-term abortions would be de-recommended from the doctor because they would go, we actually do have the medical technology to keep you and
But
baby
Kyla,
alive.
the reality is most late-term abortions that are done, because I've investigated these late-term abortion
That
clinics.
should be updated.
They say, oh, this is medically indicated. This is medically indicated.
I agree.
And just as an example, anecdotally, my nephew is missing his hand. Right, amniotic bands at 20 weeks. They found it on the anatomy
Okay,
scan.
Lila, do you think that I think that a doctor who recommends that child gets killed is good? Do you think that my worldview
No.
permits
But
that?
I'm just saying the state of our legal system is that medically indicated abortions are being done constantly, and they're saying that these are needed for
Yep.
late-term abortions. So
Which
it
is
sounds
what
like
I've
you,
updated.
But it
Basi-
sounds like you oppose these, and you
Yep.
think they should be illegal.
Yeah, they should be investigated. They should be carved out for mens rea.
But should
basically.
they be
if there
illegal?
if there is murder based on discrimination of disability, yes. That
What
should
about
be,
suffering?
That's
What if they're
bad.
suffering a lot,
That's not
according
the
to
same
the
thing as
doctor?
disability. is
Okay.
it?
So
can I
you
ask
don't
you
think
about, since we have 4 minutes, can
you
I ask
don't-
you about your worldview and the legality of it?
But just, can I ask one last question
Yeah,
to make
of
sure I'm
course.
landing it here? So just to be clear, you don't think any amount of suffering or disability justifies abortion, legal
Correct.
abortion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So
Let's
I
talk about
wanna-
Texas if you want to do that route.
Sorry?
If you want to go the Texas route, I'd love to talk about Texas.
No, I want to ask you
Okay.
about your legal system. So if
Okay.
you think that life begins at conception, are you
Yes.
essentially granting that God is killing anywhere from 30 to 70% of fetuses who don't implant?
No.
So what's happening?
I think that it's hard to know exactly the number of miscarriage rates.
Yeah,
Maybe
30
it's
to 70.
30%. I mean, 70 I think is a little high. I think
Well, this is failure to implant, not miscarriage.
that is a very early miscarriage, Kyla.
So I agree. The issue is that when I'm talking about, so typically in medical data, we
Yeah.
separate these two things because different things are happening, and it's important to understand what's causing somebody to fail to implant versus what's causing a miscarriage once implantation happened. That's why I'm making these distinctions.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so are you asking me, do I think God is killing these children? No, I don't think he's killing
So
them.
God and souls.
And I would
in such
argue,
a way,
I would argue, if we want to talk about from a divine revelation perspective, that since the fall, we have things like death, of course. we have things like miscarriage. I don't think that was ever God's original design.
So where's all the like moral outrage and upset over the implantation crisis like there is for something like SIDS?
Well, I believe that there should be a lot more research and intervention done into preventing miscarriages, and a big part of this stuff that I work on, like on my podcast,
Well, implantation crisis
work that we have is
specifically.
improving gynecological care and OBGYN care for women, and identifying what are the root causes for so many miscarriages, especially women who suffer recurrent miscarriages. One of my good friends is Dr. Lauren Rubal, and she has a health clinic that does restorative reproductive medicine to identify exactly this question. And the reality is there are things you can do to prevent miscarriage. And this is, I think, a part of our healthcare field that has been, I think, ignored. And I do think it deserves more study and attention and funding, quite frankly. I mean, we've been at, for example, like
Sure.
President Trump tried to, let's fund IVF,
Just for the
right?
sake of time, can I
Okay,
follow up
go
on
ahead.
some
Sorry,
questions?
go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by your view, if life begins at conception, you're saying God is essentially allowing up to 60% to just fail to implant, right? Alongside the fact that about 20 to 30% after that also miscarry after implantation. My question to you is, should every miscarriage be investigated? Because it could be an instance of
Yeah.
a mother killing her baby.
No, and when you say
Why
God
not?
is allowing 60% of miscarriages, I mean, 100% of us in this room are going to die. God is going to allow that to
Sure,
happen.
but we're pretty upset
That
about
doesn't mean
SIDS.
God is not love. That doesn't mean that God is not just. It just means that after the fall, we all die. whether
Sure, but
we
I
die
believe
in the
that
womb or
God is
outside the womb.
logical, right? I think that he's a decently rational being, and the idea that he is just damning 60% of souls to just die by failure
I think
to
60%
implant.
is too high. We don't have evidence of that, by the way.
But so most of that is for implantation specifically is
There's
anywhere,
not
the
there's
best
not
numbers are
conclusive
40 to
evidence on that point.
60%.
There's not conclusive evidence.
So
on
it's
that. I've looked at that.
around
It's not conclusive.
half. It's around half.
That's not conclusive. That's a theory that some folks
It's
have.
not
But
a theory that some people
but
have.
even
This
if it was-
has absolutely been tested. I know. I
But-
agree
but
that the
Kyla,
science could be better.
here's
Your
an answer you
dismissal
might
of the
like.
numbers doesn't deal with the
But
fact
here's an
that
an- but-
50%
sure,
of
I'll give it
human
to you,
lives
50%.
die from failure to implant. So where is the moral outrage and issue over implantation crisis?
As I said before, I think that women's health care, especially our reproductive health care, is abysmal. It's all about abortion rights today, which is sick and disgusting. It should be more focused on having a healthier fertility. And I think that one of the reasons we have so much miscarriage, including so much infertility, because a lot of people are struggling with infertility today, a lot of that might be early miscarriages they might not even know they're having, right? So that could be what's happening. And I think that's a huge problem that should be addressed, Kyla. And I think it does deserve resources from top down. I think the federal government should actually be investing
Name
in
me
restorative
one
reproductive
national
medicine.
institution that is Christian that is focused specifically on the implantation crisis. Name me one.
Well, as an example, there's Natural Womanhood.
And they're focused on implantation crisis?
They're focused, I don't think they call it implantation crisis,
Well,
but they
there's
call it...
people dedicated specifically to
but they
implantation
do-
errors, to
but they
trisomy
do-
13.
Yeah.
So where's the implantation crisis?
They absolutely talk about the high
Nowhere,
rates of miscarriage.
exactly. So imagine a
But
woman
Kyla,
knows that
they
she has
do.
a very low
You should
implantation
talk to my
rate.
friend. I mean,
and
there's absolutely
I don't need
doctors
to.
who
I
work.
don't need to
Margaret
because I
Duane is another
understand-
one.
I understand
She's
that
fantastic.
people do not think that life begins at conception functionally. Nobody acts this way. This is why
That's
every person
completely
picks the
untrue.
baby. Every person picks
That's
the baby
totally untrue.
until about the second trimester. That's just a
Yeah.
reality. So
That's
imagine
not-
you have a
that's
woman
not-
who
I
knows that
disagree.
she has a very low implantation rate and high miscarriage rate. She aborts 90% spontaneous abortion of her babies. Is she recklessly endangering her children by continuing to try to have a child?
So you're saying women who have high miscarriage rates, should they be basically prevented from conceiving? Is your argument?
I am
today, sounds
asking
like.
you if life begins
And I would
at
say
conception.
absolutely not.
Thank you
They
for
should
that
not.
open
Can we go
discussion.
10 more minutes? Can we do that, guys? Is that allowed? I love talking to her. Is that okay? I'm sorry.
We
We're
had
the
to set
moderators.
aside time for Q&A if you wanted to.
If folks are okay, she said she's here all night. I can be here a little later. My kids are asleep. I don't know.
We
It's-
could
I-
extend for 5 minutes if that
5 more
works.
minutes? Is that okay with you, Kyla?
You guys paid for me to be here. You have
Okay.
all of my evening. Do not worry about me.
Yay, okay.
Yeah, don't worry about me.
No, this is a great line of conversation around miscarriage. And
Okay.
yeah, so I think we agree, it sounds like, that there should be more help to prevent miscarriage and understand miscarriage.
Sure, but by
And I
your
know great people working on
logic,
that.
isn't she, if we're talking
Yeah.
about intention, mens rea, do you know the 4 categories of mens rea? And again,
Tell me.
not a gotcha.
Tell me them.
Okay,
Yeah.
there is intentional, right? You're intending to do it.
Great.
There is reckless. There is, hold on, I should actually have them written down somewhere.
Okay.
Purpose, knowledge, recklessness, and negligence.
Great.
Okay, so in the case of somebody who fails to implant, let's just say all she does is fail to implant, but it's 99%
The
of the
baby is
time-
failing to implant in the mother, you're
The
saying.
baby is failing to implant in the mother.
And you're giving me a hypothetical. 99% of the time when she gets pregnant, the baby fails to implant.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And so you're asking me, do I think it should be illegal for her to
Isn't
conceive?
she at least recklessly and arguably knowingly exposing many of her children to death and potentially worse than someone who has an early abortion, who at least genuinely
my
believes
answer's a little
it's not a
nuanced here.
person?
My answer's a little nuanced here.
Cool.
You might like this, you might hate it. I don't know. We'll see. But I would say if she knew this was happening, right? I do think it would be reckless for her continue to pursue to get pregnant without identifying other and working on her health generally, because it could be the case that she's not taking care of herself, and so she's just like trying to get pregnant again and again and again, and she's not identifying, okay, how do I become healthier so I can be a safe harbor for this baby? So I would, and that doesn't mean she doesn't have the right to children. It doesn't mean that, she's a murderer if the child dies via miscarriage, but it does mean I do think she has a responsibility, and I think all mothers have this responsibility to care for their bodies, period, and to certainly care for their bodies when their body is caring for another body.
Say she doesn't. Should she be investigated for reckless endangerment of her child?
Walk that out more. Like, what's an example of this? She's like slamming alcohol and like smoking and things like that.
I'll give B, right? I have something called Sjogren's disease and a couple of other like autoimmunes. It makes it very hard for things to be habitable.
But is she like going out and like partying hard?
No, it's just
she's just sick herself.
It's just natural.
Yep. Yeah. If she's just sick herself, no, I don't think she should be prohibited because she can't.
Why?
She can't help that. But if she's like hard partying and drinking, doing drugs and drinking, yeah, I don't think that should be legal. I think that should not be legal to hard party and drink and do drugs when you're pregnant.
The issue is that if I don't intend to kill somebody and I still hit them with my car, I'm still morally and legally culpable.
You can still
for that
be
death.
culpable for manslaughter. Yeah.
Agreed. So how is she, even though she's not intending it?
Because
right? In this
even
case,
come
it's
on,
mens rea.
Kyla, even under our existing legal
She's
system,
being reckless
Yeah,
by
but-
your definition. By my definition, it's fine.
But
She
even
can
our
keep trying.
I think our legal system actually does a good job on this for born children, because our legal system right now, if you're a parent and you commit neglect because you don't feed your child, or you don't bathe your child, or you don't whatever your child, right? You can go to jail regardless of your mens rea, right? You can actually be charged with criminal neglect. And actually you can be additionally charged if you were like an addict. And that's one of the reasons you could lose custody entirely as well. But I think that if you're just somebody who has more difficulty parenting because of a disability that you have, or you're sick, so you spend a lot of time in the hospital, and therefore you're not there for your children as much as you would like to be, I don't think that means you should then go to jail or something for that. And our current legal system
but our current system would
acknowledges
potentially,
that.
foster care would start happening, right? I've worked with women in this situation where their mental illness is so severe that we do intervene because we recognize that while she's not intending to do something wrong, she still is.
Yeah, and I think that I agree with that. I think the difference is when the baby is unborn, right? You can't grant safe harbor to another person. We don't have the medical technology for that, at least yet. And so I think the better path is to do the best that you can to help the mother and give good care to the mother, which is why I am such a big fan of better women's health care, supporting our pregnancy resource centers, supporting reproductive restorative medicine, et cetera.
Sure. So I think you said you wouldn't want to investigate her, correct?
If she's not hard partying, she's just very sick. No, I would not investigate her.
Okay, so my question to you would basically be, if you want to criminalize abortion against people who are seeking it, if you want to make it illegal, at what age do you want investigations to initiate?
Of abortions?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think if there's very clear evidence of a very early term abortion, that should be investigated. For example,
so in the case of the reckless woman, there's nothing wrong with her.
But she's not intentionally. But
she's being
Kyla,
so
come on. There's a difference between intentionally ending the life
not
of a
with
child,
mens rea, right? I agree.
And a child that is just dying naturally.
I agree that there is a difference between me purposely stabbing somebody and me accidentally running somebody over with my car. Obviously, one is more morally forgivable. The problem is that I'm still morally culpable because recklessness is not an excuse for immoral actions.
But I think being sick when you're pregnant is a little different than like texting and driving or running.
I didn't say
over in a
texting and
crosswalk.
driving. There
Okay,
could be you could be sliding.
I would even say
I'm
different.
driving. I'm being safe, but I happen to hit black ice. My car spins out.
Thank you.
Unbeknown to me.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay,
That would be the end of that segment.
Thanks, Kyla. That was fun.
Thank you.
Now, Lila and Kyla will each make a closing statement. Lila will present her closing statement for 6 minutes, and then Kyla will follow. You may begin.
Okay. Today we are asking ourselves the question, should abortion be legal? At the beginning of this debate, I defined what abortion was, which hasn't been contested by my esteemed opponent. And that definition included abortion being the intentional taking of an innocent human life. Now, throughout this debate, there has been a debate around the question of, does every human life have rights under the law as legal persons? And of course, my position is that yes, they do. And I gave a wonderful test to determine why that should be the case, which is SLED. And I talked about how any child that is born, you could use the standard of SLED for that child the same way you could use that standard of SLED for a child that is unborn. And this has yet to be contested by Kyla, so I'm curious if she will contest this in her closing statement. And what is SLED? Let's just revisit this briefly, because my case is that it is always wrong to take an innocent human life, and it should always be illegal to take an innocent human life, intentionally take an innocent human life. Abortion intentionally takes an innocent human life, therefore abortion should be illegal. It's always wrong and should be illegal. Look at the differences between an unborn child and a newborn child. There is very little difference at that stage. There's literally inches of birth canal and minutes between them. Both of these children deserve legal protection. Any standard that Kyla has presented, ultimately under SLED, I think falls short. The one standard that she has presented against SLED has to do with degree of development, your level of development, and that is this murky area of consciousness. But even this standard, I think, falls short because your development, your brain's development does not determine your humanity. I think that there are people that have severe developmental disorders with their brain, and they are just as much a human. You can actually have such a severe developmental brain disorder that you might not even fit Kyla's definition of ensoulment, and you are still, I believe, a person and should have legal rights under the law. And if you have a severe accident after birth and you lose part of your brain, or you have severe brain damage and so you're missing parts of your brain, or parts of your brain are so damaged they no longer function, you still should be treated with the same legal rights as somebody that does not have those disabilities or those injuries. And so any standard that Kyla can present for why this human life doesn't deserve legal protection versus that human life, I think falls short in the end. And I think it comes back to, what kind of country do we want to live in as individuals? Do we want to live in a country that values people based on their development, based on their consciousness and their strength, based on their independence? Or do we want to value people based on the fact that they're human? And to be human is enough. And I think a society that is a just one needs to acknowledge every single human life's, not just value, but fundamental human rights, the first of which is life. I want to briefly respond to something Kyla said as well. We didn't get to hash it out as much as I would have liked, but she made this comment about why it's unworkable ultimately to criminalize abortion because of all the bad outcomes that we will see. And she briefly mentioned Texas. And I think this is an important point for me to conclude with here, because in one sense, perhaps, Kyla would support criminalization of abortion if, in her view, there's not these negative consequences, right? And because she supports the criminalization of a lot of abortions, it sounds like, as we've discovered this evening. But the reality is, those reasons for why, the consequences for why abortion being criminalized is somehow bad. Texas was mentioned as an example. Children being born, an infant mortality rate that spikes because children are born that would have been killed before birth. That's not somehow a lose for pro-life laws, right? Because someone goes into the foster care, what that means is the baby had dignity and was cared for and died naturally instead of being lethally injected or torn apart in utero. When we talk about increased mortality rates for infants in Texas, that's because they weren't aborted before birth, and so they die after birth. That isn't some sort of a lose for pro-life laws. And similarly, to say that, more children might go into foster care, there might be more people to care for in our medical system. These all things might be true. There might be more children that are born to deadbeat parents. Some of this might be true. The reality is, there are a lot of issues in our society today that need to be solved. There is a foster care system that needs more loving parents to join to help raise these kids. There are struggling families who need more support and care. There are women having repeat miscarriages that need better health care. All of these things are true. But none of these things are solved by legalizing the direct and intentional killing of living human beings in the womb. None of those problems are solved. I would argue that in addition to making abortion illegal, we focus our efforts not on protecting the legal right to kill a baby, but we instead focus our efforts in making this country a better place for women, for babies, for families, for all of us. That's where the focus should be. Instead of protecting the legal right to kill a child in the womb for whatever reason, we should focus on ensuring that life is better for everyone, and we have better medical care for everyone, and we care for orphans, and we care for children in foster care. And I hope maybe this is some common ground. I'm curious what Kyla will say in her closing remarks. But at the end of the day, there are foundational human rights that are not given to us by the state or by democratic vote. They are given to us by our Creator. And yes, proudly, that's how our country was founded. And that's a good thing. And the first human right is life.
Thank
you,
you,
And you don't
Lila.
get that right at birth. You get it by virtue of being a human. Thank you.
Thank you. Kyla, you may present your closing statement.
As a debater, my goal in these discussions is to always cut away information and arguments that do not logically lead us in the direction of truth. One of the things I told you at the very beginning of this conversation is that these things are not simple, that there is theological complexity on this, as we've outlined today. Exodus 21 is a good example. Why did God tell Moses, with the early Hebrews, that when a woman who's pregnant is harmed, that it might be okay, essentially, that if the child is lost, child dies as a result of the physical harm that she takes, but the woman doesn't, that the perpetrator would pay a fine. However, if the woman also dies, then it's capital punishment. Do you remember the code of Hammurabi I told you? It's identical to that one. Why would God be agreeing with the code of Hammurabi? If you look at Augustine and Aquinas, they said abortion, while always not ideal, is different after 40 days because they believe the quickening, which is essentially when you can feel the baby punching and kicking, and every mom knows it's a circus under there. The quickening is when the baby is for sure ensouled. That was Augustine and Aquinas who believed this, right? If we actually go back, it wasn't until about basically in the last 100 years, where the papal bull was released to be like, you know what, actually I changed my mind. It's not about ensoulment, it's about conception. But if you notice, the Pope doesn't tell you when the life is ensouled. And as a Christian, that's the most important thing to me here, because it's very important to me that we actually wrestle with this, because our church leaders still to this day wrestle with this. It's not simple. And every single person who wants to insist to you that it is simple is lying to you. That's not an honest analysis of the philosophy and the question at hand. I believe that if anyone has regard for making the world a better place, they should first go through the toil to arrive at true, justified belief. Lila just now said that I haven't contested her definition. I contested it immediately in my intro. I said you don't get to define away the conversation. If you just say abortion equals murder, now there's no conversation to be had because, yeah, nobody likes murder. The issue, what it does, is it moves away from the core question of what it means to be human, which is the question Aristotle poses centuries ago. What does it mean to be human? What makes us distinct from animals? What makes us in between demons and angels, essentially, was what he talked about. And what I would suggest to you, my conclusion right now, and I could be wrong because it's complicated, is that legally, with the current state of social safety nets, education, healthcare, and child support, abortion must be decriminalized because it improves all of the factors we can all agree matter. We can agree that reducing abortions is good. Canada, per capita, has a lower abortion rate. Per capita, despite it being decriminalized for decades at this point. There is also lower childhood poverty, which I agree, childhood poverty doesn't justify killing that baby, but it does put an analysis of saying, what life are we offering to people? Because a woman thinking about an abortion isn't just being willy-nilly and being like, haha, I'm so silly and whimsical, maybe I'll get an abortion today. What she's actually doing is going, when is this life a person? And I'm staring down the face of oftentimes poverty, because a lot of the people who get abortions are moms. And the reason they get it is because they are afraid they can't even caretake for the other four. And they have to go, I don't know what the right decision is here. It's really complicated. And I am opposed to a system that imposes tyranny on people's choices because they don't agree with my faith or because they are uncertain about the answers to do. I want it between doctors and women because I, A, trust doctors, by and large, to be good, moral people. I think that they want to not do harm. And I think every doctor understands that personhood matters. And you might be like, there's some god-awful doctors. That's true. I want to carve out legal ways to evaluate mens rea, which there already are. Morally, the choice is way less clear. I argued consciousness is a relevant underpinning that we shorthand when we refer to the value of human life. Human consciousness, while immaterial, is believed to emerge from the complexity of the brain, right? Even in the case of these young children with minimal cerebellar activity, we see neuroplasticity taking part and driving this. I'm using consciousness as a proxy for ensoulment because we definitely care about consciousness, and it's the only immaterial thing that I can point to for both secular people and Christian people to put a finger on. And consciousness and when it emerges, the best guess is probably something from the brain's development. This is why I could be slid backwards or forwards. Science is evolving, and our understanding of human biology and the brain will make this more clear with time, but for now, this is the best we have. My opponent has provided exactly 0 justified arguments for why abortion should certainly be criminalized, has appealed repeatedly to science for her morality, and tried to woo you with emotionally loaded anecdotes despite clearly deriving her predilections from religion, which is okay, by the way, just be honest about it. This thesis is an insult to British common law and the dream of the American founding fathers. When it comes to issues as historically and currently complex as human life, it is our duty to treat it with the sanctity and the heaviness of what that topic is. And that means when you close your eyes and you think about brown and I ask you to think about the red, that means challenging your presumptions. That means wondering where you could be wrong because our brains love to be right. That's what this means. I'm not here to change your mind. I'm only asking you to genuinely, philosophically think about it, and Lila is not doing that.
Thank you, Kyla, for that. All right, thank you both for taking the time to debate and be present this evening. At this point, we'll be moving into the student Q&A period. To start off this segment, Sadie will ask Kyla a question, and then I will ask Lila a question, and then the mic will then be open to the audience to ask a question.
Kyla, currently, when genetic testing reveals an unborn child has Down syndrome or a severe genetic anomaly, most women choose to abort. How do you answer the charge that this phenomenon resembles the eugenics movement a century ago?
It is. I've already said, I think that when people kill somebody exclusively because it'll be hard to raise them, they have a disability, I think that's a bad reason to make that choice. I don't think that that's a good choice for abortion by any means, especially if she's making that choice after they're ensouled. If it's before they're ensouled, that's a different conversation, and I'm open to that.
Thank you.
All right, Lila, in the pro-life movement, there has been mixed feelings and beliefs regarding IVF. For example, some equate the failed embryo transfer to aborting the fetus. What are your personal thoughts on IVF, and how would you reform it?
I think IVF is very problematic. You can argue that it is possible that more children are being killed via IVF than via abortion because of the sheer amount of children that are destroyed after being brought into life because they're not seen as good enough, they're not graded as good enough, or they are otherwise just discarded because they aren't wanted anymore by the parents that created them, which is horrific. I think children deserve to be conceived in love, in their parents' love in a marriage, and that's ideal. And I think that creating children outside of a mother's body where it's a safe haven for them typically is also dangerous and leads to a lot of negative consequences for those children. So I think it's very morally problematic, it's morally wrong, and I think it's terrible that we basically have the Wild West here in the US where IVF is just allowed really virtually with no restriction or regulation.
Thank you. The mic will now be open to the audience to ask Lila or Kyla a question. If you would like to ask a question to Kyla, I ask that you would line up in this row over here. If you would like to ask a question to Lila, please line up in this row over here. We kindly ask that you would adhere to the following. Please state your name before asking a question. And for every question asked, both debaters may respond, even if the question is directed to only one of them. Thank you.
Hi, Kyla.
Hi.
My name's Zoe.
Zoe?
Yes, and
Nice
I
to
just
meet
had a question. So I wanted to talk about that Exodus passage that you brought up.
Sure.
About the fine for a child dying, for the baby dying, and the capital punishment for the mother dying. So I looked it up, and I just wanted to read it if that's okay.
Sure.
And it says, this is Exodus 21:22. Now suppose two men are fighting, and in the process they accidentally strike a pregnant woman, so she gives birth prematurely. If no further injury results, the man who struck the woman must pay the amount of compensation the woman's husband demands and the judge approves. But if there is further injury, the punishment must match the injury: a life for a life, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, etc. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, because I know that you mentioned if the child is killed in the womb, then it's a fine. But this one actually, the Bible actually says if the woman gives birth prematurely, which doesn't immediately imply the child is killed. It just means that the woman gave birth before her time. So if you go down to verse 23 and it says, but if there's further injury, this could apply to either the baby or the mother, that the punishment must match. So it's not necessarily saying, well, the punishment for the child dying is greater than the mother's, or lesser than the mother's, sorry. It's saying that the punishment is equal for both the child and the mother, and they are both equal valuable lives.
So that's incorrect, unfortunately. Sorry. So if you look at do you know what the Septuagint is? And again, it's okay if you don't. Do you know what it is?
Remind me. I have heard of it.
All good, all good. So this is like one of the earliest Greek translations we have of the Old Hebrew Bible. It's what the early church fathers used when they were writing the New Testament, okay? So it's a really, really important document. And if you actually read that document, I have a ESV here. I'm sorry, Gideon, okay, not your best, but it's okay. It says, when men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out. And when you actually look at the Septuagint, it's informed in part by the Hittites, which is like an Indo-European group. But essentially, what the Septuagint translator says is that if the child is unformed, then the fine specifically is just monetary. And if the mother is lost, it would be financial. This is just within the Septuagint. When it says in 23, but if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life. In the Septuagint, it clarifies and said, if there is harm to the mother or the formed child. So the Septuagint in Exodus 21 actually delineates between an unformed child and a formed child. Now, to be clear, the Bible never clarifies when that point is, which is fun for us, but unfortunately, you're a little bit incorrect in your readings here. I apologize.
I think an important thing I want to just add here, and you kind of reference it in your closing remarks, Kyla, was the idea of quickening, like the baby being unformed versus formed. And throughout church history, there have been different church fathers and doctors who have weighed in, and there has been a question mark about when does human life begin before we have all of the scientific data that we have today and the degree of medical technology that we have today to understand and ascertain life's earliest beginning. So I think part of this has to do with, I would argue this verse has in part to do with the mens rea of the people committing this crime against this woman and this early miscarriage potentially, because there wasn't as much clarity around the earliest the beginnings of human life. And quickening was often understood to mean when the baby is somehow alive. So there wasn't as much understanding as before quickening, the baby's still very much alive. It's not that there isn't a baby there that's alive. It's just that the baby obviously hasn't given a sign of life yet. They didn't have ultrasound. They didn't have pregnancy tests. They didn't understand the exact scientific development of the child before quickening as we do today. So I think that's also very important historical context, both for understanding that Bible verse and understanding the church fathers and doctors.
Yep.
Some of the church
the
fathers,
Exodus
I should
writers
say.
are taking it from the Hittites and Aristotle actually directly, because
They had to go off what was observable, based on what they understood about human life.
Yeah, so the Hittites used quickening to basically basically essentially what we call the third trimester and then a third trimester, and they had different legal penalties for each of these stages. Aristotle basically went unformed and formed, and that's what Exodus takes, right? Because they acknowledge that there is something called an unformed fetus that is different than this. So yes, later the
Well, they had no way to
quickening
tell
came
the
out.
heart is beating at 3.5 weeks. And just as an example, right? I think if Aquinas had heard the heart beating at 3.5 weeks, or if they, during this time in Exodus, when they were creating this very rudimentary early form law, a legal system for these tribal itinerant groups, right?
Maybe.
They're trying to understand how do we have justice, right? But they didn't have as much of an understanding as we do today about life's earliest beginnings.
Maybe,
and about
but the
what
issue is,
the unformed baby
in the case of
actually is.
Aquinas, he talks about process of development and specifically says, well, we don't really know what ensoulment is, so 40 days is the best one. But Aquinas and early church fathers cared about ensoulment. It wasn't until
but Aquinas had no idea about the heart beating at 3.5
Sure, but the
weeks as
issue
an
is that the
example.
papal bull with Pope Pius IX came out in 1879, and it came out because he just read biology stuff. And again, I reject the idea, even within the church, that we just switch biology as our garter for when ensoulment happens. That feels like an incredibly
That's not what
theologically
I'm
dishonest
arguing
thing to do.
for. That's not what I'm arguing for.
That's what Pope Pius did, right? When he released the papal bull, where he actually said, you know what, we're going back to Sixtus's proclamation in the 1500s. What he did is he basically said, you know what, this one German guy found that when I insert sperm and an egg of a sea urchin together.
I think at this point we're going to move on to another question. We
All
have
right.
a lot of people that want to ask a question.
Hi, Lila. My name is Marisol Uribe, and I am a financial professional involved in legacy planning and life insurance. And I want to ask you, in your work with families and culture, what do you believe is the most overlooked step in building a legacy that actually lasts?
The most overlooked step at building a legacy, you mean for parents or for just individuals in general? Are you talking about family legacy?
Family.
Family legacy? The most overlooked step, that's an interesting question. An overlooked step at large in our culture. I would absolutely say that the end goal of a parent should be that their children go to heaven and not Harvard. And so I think as a society, the formation of a child's soul is just as important, of course, as the protection of their body or the development of their intellect to achieve certain career metrics or goals. So I think developing children's souls should be much more paid attention to.
When does that soul enter the body?
It doesn't matter because
Sure it does.
because it
As
doesn't.
Christians, we don't edify the body over the soul. There's no world, right?
But in terms of it doesn't matter, we don't know the exact. The church hasn't spoken from divine revelation on the exact moment of ensoulment before birth, but we know that children have souls.
Would you be opposed to taking
and
somebody?
I would argue, just to be clear, Kyla, I would argue that even before ensoulment, a soul still belongs to that body, and that's part of why it would be wrong to still kill that body, even if ensoulment hasn't happened. When Jesus Christ came into the world as a single-cell embryo, did he have a soul? Maybe it wasn't there yet, but it was going to come, within days. We don't know exactly. It's a mystery.
Yeah,
but it doesn't really matter.
potential
It's a mystery that doesn't matter in the sense of their value, their worth, and their
Sure,
legal
it does.
protection.
We always confer different weights to potential in a vacuum, right? Nobody cares about how many millions of potential souls that could exist in your sperm in the sock die when you ejaculate into it, unless you're opposed to contraception. I'm not actually sure your position on it, right? This would be
I think a
potential
sperm
in
is
vacuum.
radically different than a single-cell embryo.
Sure,
A
that would
sperm
be
is not a
something
whole human
reasonable.
being.
Yeah, that would be something like reasonable potential. However, the thing that we tend to place a lot of value on is somewhere around reasonable and definitely at assumed,
I mean,
which is
my argument.
second and
Thank
third
you.
term.
Yeah,
Excuse
okay.
me, I have a follow-up question. For those looking to amplify their voice, I wanted to ask you, Lila, what made you realize that your voice needed to be louder than your fear
My voice needed to be louder.
in terms of this movement and this community?
Just learning about the death toll. 100% preventable because these were intentional and direct slayings of innocent human lives. And the fact that we can, through both education and care and our legal system, work to protect these human beings and make this country friendlier for children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we go into our next question, if we could just keep it to one statement each and limit the
Sure,
back and forth.
yes.
But it's
My
so
apologies.
fun.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jericho. Thank you guys so much both for doing this. This is really cool. My question is for you, Kyla. I don't feel like I properly understand your position. You said that abortion should be decriminalized. So when should killing be criminalized? And what is the substantive distinction between when it should be criminalized and when it shouldn't?
So my distinction between, so are you defining abortion as equals killing?
Well, you had said abortion was killing.
No.
You had said that multiple times, that killing a fetus.
So again, what you're doing is what we call essentially like an equivocation, where you're taking, or a definist fallacy, really, where you're basically being like, abortion equals killing. And it's like, okay, well, miscarriages are also medically defined as abortions, but I'm sure you would agree that that's not killing.
Well, that's why I'm trying to clarify your position, because I thought you said that, so maybe I misheard
My
you.
position is I'm talking about direct and intentional killing. I'm not talking about miscarriage.
Sure.
That's what I want to ban.
My definition of an abortion
That's how I'm defining abortion.
is ending a pregnancy, a human pregnancy.
And that's killing?
It sometimes is, depends on the consciousness state.
So
right?
when should that be criminalized? When should killing be criminalized?
So killing, it depends on what you mean. What mens rea are we
No,
applying?
you tell me.
What?
You tell me when
Well,
killing
the
should
issue
be
is
criminalized.
what you're doing is you're swapping words around, right? You're saying killing, which is super morally loaded. And I go, well, what do you mean? Because before 12 to 15 weeks, I don't think you're killing a person.
Well, obviously, intentionally ending a life could be justified.
What if you're recklessly ending a life? Is that not killing someone too?
Well, this is why I'm asking you to.
Well, answer my question. Is recklessly ending a life ending a life?
Yeah, and I believe that.
Okay, so the
and that is
intentional
criminalized.
piece. Well, hold
Yeah.
on. The intentional piece doesn't matter here because nobody cares about intention when we're talking about killing. You're only adding it in because it describes to helping you define away abortion, and that's my issue
So
with
what's
the
your
topic.
position?
I'll state it again. My position is that up until 12 to 15 weeks.
No, in general, not even, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but not even just for abortion, just in general. Like,
What does that mean? My position is that God is good and I love Him. I don't know. What does this mean?
okay, for example, I believe it's, like, I agree with Lila. I'm a Christian, I'm very pro-life. I believe that it is murder. It's always wrong, and
What
it
is
should
murder?
be criminalized. It should be criminalized to take away an innocent life.
Should it be criminalized to kill somebody in self-defense? Isn't that murder?
That is not murder. But,
Why not? You're
but
killing somebody intentionally.
Nonetheless, I'm trying to.
Why not?
Why not? Well, again, I'm trying to define here what is the substantive distinction of when it's okay to kill someone, like in a justified killing.
So in the case of
versus-
self-defense, why is it not murder when you kill them in self-defense, but if you don't kill them in self-defense, it is murder? What's the substantive difference there?
Well, I believe that you're forfeiting your right to life when you intentionally are trying to harm someone and you get killed out of someone enacting their
So it's just like a
self-defense.
natural conclusion? Your distinction is essentially a natural conclusion?
No, it's. I believe that's like.
So
I get
if I don't kill somebody in self-defense, but you watch somebody try to kill me, do you get to kill them?
Say that again.
So say somebody tries to attack me, and I don't kill them in self-defense. Do you get to, because you saw them forfeit their life? Do you get to kill them?
I mean, that's kind of like sometimes I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
Like sometimes we do that in war. Like
War is not even remotely similar to self-defense, right?
Sure,
War,
sure,
We
but
have
that's why I'm
already
asking
begged
your
the assumption
definition.
that war is already assuming that awful horror tragedy is happening,
Yeah.
and what it is in war is a moral weighting of how to make it as least horrific as possible.
Okay, I'll wrap it up here because
Okay.
I don't mean to say it like this, but my question was for you, not for you to question
So
me.
what
I just don't
what you're
understand
running
your
into
position.
is I'm equivocating. So what you're running into is I'm equivocating like you do, which is a problem. It's fallacious, right? And the reason why it's tricky is because it's fallacious. I do not believe it's a person until 12 to 15 weeks, which I've said. I think it should be decriminalized broadband with our current medical, healthcare, and social welfare state. However, there are carve-outs for specific mens rea that should be criminalized, specifically if you can establish that the killing is done exclusively for disability, or if they're like just willy-nilly enjoying killing babies. Yes. That's my answer, which I've said multiple times.
If I may say a comment here as well. So in my opening speech, and my position, of course, is that abortion should be made illegal. But I defined abortion because it sounds like we've had different definitions of abortion all this time, Kyla, which is very
Of course,
problematic.
I said that in the intro.
In my intro, I defined abortion, what I want to ban specifically. So let's just say what Lila wants to ban, okay? Because you can, I'll grant you actually, whatever you want to define it as you want. We can come up with a new term just for the sake of discussion tonight. Come up with a word, but this is what I want to ban. I want to ban the direct and intentional killing of innocent human lives in the womb because they are already banned outside of the womb, and I want them to be banned inside the womb.
But then my response is, why are there human lives that is conferred moral protectionism? Why?
You say that again?
My question is, why are they human lives specifically in a moral way?
Why are they human lives in the womb?
In a moral way, not in
and
a
I would say-
biological way.
and
in
this
a
is where-
moral
I
this
think
is
we're going
where-
to move on
Okay,
to
sorry.
the next section. We have a
But this is
long
where
line.
science really helps you identify
Nope,
what
science
makes a
is not
human
morality.
life,
Science
and
is not
whether someone
morality.
is living or not.
Nope, you don't get to say science says human life begins here, so
My
that's
position
my
is
morals.
all human lives are persons.
My moral answer
That's
is
my
God
position.
ensouls
Thank
us,
you. I
and
think
that's
we're
what
going to move
matters.
on to the next question. Thank you.
All right. Lila, I just wanted to ask, I am pro-life. With respect to Kyla, I believe that anyone who is a Christian should be pro-life. But my question actually is, for someone like, especially like a young guy, I'm not looking really to like, have a family like anytime soon, at least not in the near future. What would you say to like a lot of young guys who probably who might not even be Christians too, where they kind of like have this disconnect to the issue, where they kind of consider, oh, this is just kind of a women's issue. What right do we have as guys to kind of like speak out against this or get involved? What would you say to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think men are leaders and they have every right to speak out against abortion. Half of the babies killed by abortion are men, are little boys. Every child that's aborted has a father. So this is a human issue for both men and women. It's not like a issue for just women or for just men. And I think some of the best leaders I know in the pro-life movement, ones that I'm privileged to work with, are men, and I'm incredibly grateful for them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Emerson Torres. I want to take a moment to circle back to the first, I believe, question that was asked regarding the Babylonian law. Yes, exactly. I wanted to sort of just come to an understanding with it because you said that she wasn't really under the correct impression or correct belief when it came to the verse. In regards to mens rea, I do believe that it does apply here, just because it's a guilty conscience. This person is coming and attacking this pregnant woman, and she is obviously pregnant. It's not that it's a hidden thing. And it's talking about if this woman is attacked prematurely and attacked and then prematurely giving birth, that there should be a fine. I personally am affected sort of by this verse, as I was born 3 months premature, and I spent 3 months in the NICU. With that being said, that's very expensive. Premature babies take more care, they take more attention, and that type of money would go basically towards taking care of that baby for the bereavement that has sort of happened to this woman. I don't believe that the verse itself is ambiguous in any sense. If you go towards the end, it's obviously talking about if there's any further damage, and that damage, does count towards flesh, and that's regardless of whether we want to talk about morality or whether there is a soul there or not. That flesh is being destroyed. So it is, and goes on clearly to be an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life.
For the woman.
And then also, there is a verse that does talk to Jeremiah. It's in Jeremiah, and you can read it, but it says, I knew you before the womb, and I appointed you. I believe fully.
This doesn't say life begins at conception. It says, I knew you the whole time. In my system, it's possible that God just plants the soul after implantation. It's possible that God plants the soul when the brain begins to emerge.
Yes.
I would basically tell secular people that cute thing you love called consciousness that you don't want to call a soul, it's a soul. You just don't like Jesus, right? That would be my answer, is that the consciousness is the soul. That's the emergence of it.
But my question particularly comes to the clarity of that verse. I don't believe that it is ambiguous in any sense, and I would like to challenge you to further do your research, as the Hebrew word for a miscarriage or something is never applied in that verse, where it is in other verses.
Sure.
So I am coming to a conclusion where there is no ambiguity in this verse, where you clearly said that there should be or that there is.
I didn't say there's ambiguity. So
Or you profess
murder,
that she did not understand it to the extent that maybe you profess.
because if a man assaults a woman and her baby is aborted spontaneously as a result, and the Bible says that it's a monetary fine, why? In the Bible, it is, hold on, just wait, I'll let you talk.
That's never
Just wait.
said, it's never stated.
Okay,
It says the
Genesis
baby was born
9:6,
premature.
murder is punishable by capital death. Exodus 21:12, Numbers 35:30-31. Manslaughter, which is what you could argue that this would be, is also defined in it. It says Exodus 21:1, exile, right? Numbers 35:6, exile. Deuteronomy 4:41. Why is it that God is creating a unique carve-out that could apply to manslaughter or murder and saying it's a monetary fine when he's already talked about manslaughter and
But
he's already talked about murder?
you're
If
answering
he
my
needs to
question.
clarify these things, it suggests at least that this is hard to know, and it's possible that he's not placing the same moral value on this.
But the only thing is that answer that you gave me has nothing to do with the verse, because the verse never talks about the child dying. The verse talks specifically about a premature birth.
What happens to an unformed baby that is spontaneously aborted in like ancient Hebrew times? What happens to it? Do you think it dies or lives?
Where is the abortion in the verse?
Right here it says, so that her children come out. It's a spontaneous abortion.
But
It's
where
not-
I think perhaps what you're going with here, and I'll just weigh in really quick, was the intention of these two men, did they know that she was pregnant in an early term
it
pregnancy?
doesn't matter.
And
Manslaughter results in exile.
But I think it's important because
It's not
they were
important because
attacking
there's
her,
already a
not the
legal
child
carve-out for
directly.
this.
And I think
Nope.
that has to do with part
Why
of it.
would
yes.
God specifically delineate that if you manslaughter an unborn child, it's actually just a monetary fine? But if you manslaughter anyone else,
don't
it's
believe
exile.
that you understand
Why
the
would he do
question.
that?
I
Why
don't
would he
believe
do
you
that?
understand the question because it is never stated that the baby
Thank
dies.
you. I
It's
think
just
It
we're
a
gonna
is.
move on to
If you
another
read the
question.
Septuagint, it's unquestionable there.
I challenge you to do further research on that.
I've
because
done
it's
plenty
very
of
clear.
research. I've run biblical scholars, and I don't appreciate being condescended to because we disagree.
My position is that verse in no way removes the sanctity of life from that
I didn't
earlier
say that it
formed
does.
baby.
I
Thank you.
said
We're
that it's
gonna move on
morally
to the
weighted.
next
or the
question.
right to that baby having protection.
I didn't say that. I said that it's morally weighting the
Thank
unformed
you.
fetus.
We're going to move
differently.
on to the next question. Thank you.
Hello. I first wanted to start off by thanking you both for coming here. This has been a very incredible debate, and I've enjoyed hearing both sides. My question is for Lila. I'm Lila and Kyla. I'm a student here at Vanguard University. I do have a series of questions, so I don't mean to be rude, but I would like quicker answers so I can ask some of the things I have in mind. My first question is, why do you view legality as different from morality? Or if you do, or if you don't, can I ask why?
Sure. And what was your name?
Lillian.
Lillian. Thank you, Lillian. Well, I think that all of our laws are based on morality, moral realities. But not all moral realities should have laws, that, a legal system that prohibits them or permits them.
Okay.
So I think when it comes to foundational human rights, like my right to not be killed, that is both a moral law, that it is wrong to kill an innocent life, and I think it should also be a law, a legal policy that prohibits killing. But as an example, if somebody lies to someone else about what they had for breakfast, right? Or even horribly, they lie to their best friend about something very significant to their best friend. I don't think there should be that's immoral in my view, but I don't think that's something that we should build a law around to say, oh, you have to go to jail, you have some fine because you lied to your best friend.
Okay. So for you, legality is tied to morality, but morality is not always defined by legality. Am I
Not
correct in that?
exactly, more that I think all of our laws have a moral reality connected to them, but that when you do something moral or immoral, that doesn't mean that we need a legal code around it.
Okay. So then my next question would be that because there are so many different moral codes, especially here in America, because we do allow a freedom of religion, there is a wide variety of moral codes. Do you think that we should value one moral code as higher than the other?
Well, I think that there's one moral truth. I don't think there's like my morality, your morality, and they're both subjective. I think there are objective moral laws. But I also think that we build a legal system on this legal system that we are in, and I think it's a good one. It's not a perfect one, but it's a good one, is built on fundamental human rights. And I think that those rights are not derived from, again, democratic vote or the people. Those rights are protected by the people, and the democratic vote should be done to best protect these rights, but those rights are given to us by God. So they are absolute rights that are given to us, but they're not, so they're not for other people to debate or decide.
Okay. So, but because there is a morality that informs legality.
Right, so as an example, I would say it's immoral, and I think most world religions acknowledge this, and most non-religious people acknowledge this. It's immoral to kill an innocent human being intentionally, right? And I think the human right that's at play there is the right to life, the right to not be killed. And so I think in that sense, there is this cross-section between our legal policy, moral law that's universal, which would be if you're going to have a just political system and a just legal system, you should ensure that you protect that first human right, life, the right to not be killed intentionally by somebody else.
As a quick question, just to follow, are you opposed to contraception?
Personally, I'm opposed to contraception, yes.
Do you think that it's immoral for other people to use contraception?
I do.
Okay, so contraception would actually prevent, even by your definition, life from even forming. So the one major preventative care for life, according to your definition, you don't support, and you think it's wrong if other people utilize it.
Well, I think there's a lot of things that I think are wrong. That doesn't mean that they should be illegal.
I didn't say that you think
at
it
this
should be
point we
illegal
should move on
necessarily,
to
but
the
I'd be
next
curious about that.
question. Thank you.
Can I say super briefly why I oppose contraception? I oppose contraception because I think that there's an order to morale. There's a moral system, and it has to do with the natural order. And the natural order around sex shows us that sex is designed for two things, the unitive and the procreative.
Sure.
So it can both bring life into the world and it can bond two people together. And I think when you sever those two, you go against the natural order, and you also have a lot of consequences for other people, including new life that might be conceived.
Thank you. Moving into these next questions, we'll do one question, no follow-ups, and try to keep it brief.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Zoe. I'm a student here.
Hi, Zoe.
My question for you is, you talked about that you have statistics proving that countries that decriminalize abortion have less abortion, healthier mothers, and healthier children. Why do you think that this would work here in the United States as well as it works in Canada?
I think Americans are smart and capable. I think American doctors are some of the best educated doctors on the entire planet. And I think the doctor and the woman, if we assume Americans are by and large intelligent, morally capable people, and the doctors who are the best in the world are also by and large morally and capable people, that these two people will come to the best decision for the woman. Particularly in a state, for example, if there's universal healthcare, which I know you're for free births. I'm for free, basically everything when it comes to healthcare. But you would be for free OBGYN, which I think would be another situation that would reduce abortion, which would be good.
I'll make a quick comment. I think, you put a tremendous amount of trust in doctors when doctors, literally my sister-in-law was told she could terminate her baby with a missing hand. I don't know if you know this, but in America, termination is offered frequently to pregnant mothers. And in terms of maternal mortality rates and maternal health care, countries like Ireland, before they legalized abortion, had some of the lowest maternal mortality rates in the world, at times better than the United States, that had decriminalized abortion. And so maternal mortality rates do not somehow get better because you legalize abortion, and women aren't somehow have better pregnancies because all of a sudden abortion's legalized.
In Texas, women who had children died more. Under abortion laws, women die more because it creates a bureaucratic bloat that makes being a doctor
that's not the consequence
logistically difficult.
That's not the consequence.
Yeah, there's a recent
Thank
case
you.
of
We're
Texas
gonna move on
where
to the
sepsis
next
killing a woman.
question.
Yes, this is true.
Hi, Lila. My name is Finch. First, I just wanted to say really quick, my mom really admires you and your work, and she really wanted me to tell you that tonight. She owns like a nonprofit up in this really tiny town in Oregon. Yeah, and she basically like offers support to young pregnant women who like don't have it, so she like gives them clothes and supplies and stuff.
I love that.
She told me to tell you that. I got a chance to talk to you, so shout out, Mom. So I just have a question that has to do with you saying that just because something is wrong, that doesn't mean it has to be illegal. So my question, is it possible and is it biblical to hold the stance of pro-choice and anti-abortion? And to clarify the thought process behind that, for example, like God loves us so much that he has given us the freedom to choose to sin or not to sin. So in the same way, whether you believe abortion is sinful or not, regardless of your belief around abortion itself, could you say that it is godly to give women the right to choose? Mm-hmm. Or would you say it's more godly to take away the option?
Yeah, so I think 100% it is more just for a legal system to prohibit killing. even though God did give us the freedom to go out there and, attempt to do horrible things, rape, kill, steal, whatever. I mean, technically, anybody in here could go try to do those things, right? There's not like God is, able to control your movement so you can't do them. Now, the law, I think, kicks in and should kick in to prohibit those things. So just because you can do something and God allowed you to be able to do that thing because of your free will, doesn't mean that the legal system should not prohibit that evil thing that you're trying to do. And when it comes to human rights, the first of which is life, of course that should be protected by a just government.
This is why she's very similar to a Sharia law activist, by the way, because she essentially wants to impose her.
But
because secular people.
But what about opposing death for newborns?
Secular people don't agree. They don't agree with your standard of personhood.
I know a lot of pro-life secular.
We only have time for one more question. Thank you.
I know a lot of pro-life atheists. They are out there.
She wants to impose a religious tyranny on you guys.
They're not religious. They're pro-life, though.
It is religious.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both for coming out here. My name's Joab, and I just wanted to say, Miss Kyla, you said that life begins at ensoulment and that consciousness begins at 12 to 15 weeks, and that the Bible doesn't tell the difference between a formed and unformed baby. I just want to hear your stance and your worldview and what you think about, and just your convictions about the scriptures, specifically in Jeremiah 1:5, talking about before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you and ordained you as a prophet to the nations. And in Psalm 139, verse 16, this is David talking. He says, your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed, and in your book they were all written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them.
So you'll notice in all those verses, a day of ensoulment isn't established. This is why the popes fought about it. This is why Aquinas fought about it. This is why even today there's theological wrestling about it.
But the body is still sacred.
Of course God is. Did you say God is still sacred?
The body is still sacred.
The body is not as sacred as the ensoulment, which is why in Exodus 21...
your body is still sacred.
Yes, but we do not...
As your soul is sacred,
but it's body and soul that are both sacred. The body is not morally equal to a soul.
Okay,
right?
But I think we disagree as Christians.
Is the body morally equal to a soul?
When morally equal, when you resurrect, you'll resurrect with your body, Kyla.
And that body has no soul. Is that morally equal to me?
We are both soul and body.
So if you clone me,
they're both,
and that body
they both
has
matter
no soul.
as human beings.
So my clone has a soul?
Your what?
My clone, does it have a soul?
If you were cloned, yeah, you would, and there was another human being, yeah, it would have a soul, and it would be a distinct individual soul.
My perfect clone...
identical twins have two separate souls.
It's not an identical twin, it's a clone. Right? We take it, we transpose by atoms, and we duplicate them instantly. Gotcha. So the issue with your Bible verse, just so I can answer directly, is that Exodus 21 exists. Here's one thing I would ask. Do you think that God thinks it's bad to kill children?
Yes.
So why in 1 Samuel 15:3 does he order Samuel and Saul to go strike the Amalekites and devote to destruction all that they have? Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. And in fact, when they refused to do this, Saul was punished. Why did God do that?
Saul was punished for his disobedience before, though. He was punished because he didn't sacrifice the Lord before.
It's because he took things from the Amalekites, even though he was told not to, including to kill
that same
infants.
band, though, was mentioned in Judges, though, when God told him to kill the Canaanites.
So is God saying it's good to kill infants in that moment?
Because the Canaanites were doing evil, and God does the same to his own children when they were doing bad, and that's why he brought them into exile.
So Amalekites are not humans, and they're not morally valuable, so it's actually okay to
No, because God did the same thing to his people when his people were doing sinful things, and they were doing child sacrifice.
So if you do, this is the logic right now, guys. If you do sinful things, it might be okay to kill you. That's your logic right now.
No, it's a little different when God is commanding something.
Dynamistic ontology,
though, I have an answer for this, but your logic, if you think that literally happened, that God literally directed for the Amalekites to be killed, man, woman, child, and infant, and God is good, then what you have to do is give a justification for why what God did there is good, and for Exodus 21 existing, which you haven't done.
For what? Do you mind, saying that again?
For Exodus 21 existing with the legal code of the aborted fetus being worth only monetary
God also used a covenant, the suzerain vassal covenant, to also help the people of Israel to have something familiar that they're with, though. He could have also used the same thing for that code.
So God's relative, essentially. He said, you know what, you don't get it yet, we'll use the Hittite standard, and once you get it, then we'll change it. God's relative.
No.
So it was okay in Exodus 21 that potentially that child would be legally and morally slightly less valuable
In the same
because it's
sense,
only
though,
a fine.
God also told the people, because of the hardness of your hearts, I have allowed divorce. But that's not God's intent, though. God's intent for marriage, though, for one man
So
and one
again,
woman.
that means that in the Amalekites, you're saying that God is relative. That in the Amalekite situation, because they were bad enough and because God directed it, now it's good, but suddenly it's bad now and it's not relative in any way. Can you define what's different here?
What's different is what God declares as bad. The Amalekites were supposed to be banned or demolished because of their sin. And the same thing happened to God's own people when the Babylonians took them over in 587 BC and carried over into exile.
So if God directs us to kill babies, then it's okay.
No, God, in that instance, declared them to kill them because of their sin, yeah.
So if my parents sin and I'm a little baby and God directs you to kill me, my children, my children's children, my infants, my dogs, my donkeys, now it's good.
No, in the specific to that historical context, God is punishing
So
his
God's
people.
relative, yeah.
God is specific and
It's
intentional.
one or the other. It can't be both. God is either relative or he didn't mean it when he said
Define
it.
relative then.
Relative means that it changes over time based on context and situation. So I'm a moral relativist. I actually think that relativity is extremely important. And so I would say that the context is different. But if you think that God is the same through and through and he's not relative, then you have to concede that God sometimes thinks killing infants is okay.
God's character
So is God a
the same
relativist?
Then are you saying that because the technology has improved that being unformed and being formed is different from the times historically and the times now?
Yeah, I think that God's standards for like ancient Hebrews was lower than it is for us today because they didn't know better. I think God is relative, yes. He's morally objective. That's not the same thing before you all freak out. I think he's morally objective, but I also think he's relative. And if you agree with me, you have to concede that God is morally relative, which means you have to look at Exodus 21 and try to figure out what is going on here and how you justify that with current God, because this was in the Septuagint. Just to clarify people who read this, because I finally found the Septuagint translation. If he fights, this is from the Septuagint, Exodus 21. If he fights two men and strikes a woman in the womb who has one, and she gives birth to a child not fully formed, he shall be punished with a fine. According to the measure established, you don't want to read the Bible? Gotcha.
Thank you so much. We're all out of time. We actually went overtime tonight, so thank you for such a great debate. We will be closing out now.